welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you guys. Joining me in segment number 2, Matt Josephs. You know him better as Mid-Major Matt. Going to be joining me, and we're going to be taking a look at what we've all got on the Saturday card. Some of his takeaways from the first week and a half of the season to the positive, the negative, and also how he's gauging these multi-team events, these tournaments out there in foreign environments. What are some of the things that he looks for, and so much more. A couple teams that he's bullish and bearish on as well. So, gonna have a great chat with him in segment number 2. In the final segment, gonna get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions, but you know what? We had a great day of college basketball on Friday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
The ranked teams had themselves a very nice day. A lot of covers. North Carolina was one of them. They win. They cover against UC Riverside by a count of 77-52 for North Carolina. They won the turnover battle by a count of 17-9, and not necessarily that they won the battle on the glass. They actually lost it by a count of 38-37. Armando Bacot, he had 21 points, pair of blocks, 7 rebounds, but for UC Riverside, they shoot just 30.5% from the floor, 9 of 30 from three-point range. North Carolina, they were able to shoot more like 46% from the floor, and off the bench, they were able to get some nice production. Jalen Washington, Seth Trimble, they were both able to supply 11 points. Kentucky, they take it to Stone Hill by a count of 101-67. If you took the opening number on Kentucky you got there, this thing got seamed all the way to 37.5. You did not cover on the close. That just got a little bit out of whack in general. As for Stone Hill, they do go 11 of 39 from three-point range, while Kentucky was 17 of 32 from distance, but both teams had the same amount of turnovers. Now, for Kentucky, how about off the bench? Robert Dillingham with 20 points, Reed Shepard with 25 points, so they were able to light it up, and for our good friend Stone Hill, you had Max Zagorowski be able to supply 15 points. So Stone Hill, they get within the closing number. Opening number, not so much. Oral Roberts made it a game against Texas A&M. No cover here for Texas A&M on any number. 74-66 the final as Oral Roberts. They go 11 of 28 from three-point range. Isaac McBride, Kareem Thompson, they combine for 39 points, 11 rebounds. They go 8 of 16 between the two of them from three-point range. And then for Texas A&M, 2 of 22 from 3, which, I mean, it really is a marvel that they won. And the reason why they won, they completely plowed on the glass, 53-29. They won the turnover battle, 8-5 as well. So for Texas A&M, even though they were extremely cold, they get an 8-point win, which honestly I think that's relatively impressive because they're not going to go 2 of 22 for the entirety of the season. Just like Charleston, probably not going to continue to shoot below 20% from 3. They are now overall for the season 21 of 118 from three-point range. They fall to Wyoming by a count of 67-60. Just by Murphy's Law hitting Charleston as they go 7 of 37 from 3. They actually took, in terms of field goal attempts, 34 more than Wyoming. They just couldn't find the bottom of the basket. As for Charleston, they get 23 offensive rebounds. They had all sorts of opportunities. They won the turnover battle 22-15. They just couldn't get a shot to drop. Meanwhile, for Wyoming, you had Sam Griffin go off for 24 points in this one. He goes 3 of 3 from three-point range, and that's a difference. So I'm thinking that we're going to get a good buy low spot here on Charleston. Kent State, they were steamed up, and there's a good reason why they were steamed up on Friday. They completely destroy Hampton by a count of 162 as they go 11 of 26 from three-point range. 20 big points out of Chris Payton Jr. Meanwhile, for Hampton, they do go 9 of 25 from three-point range, but they shoot about 36.5% from the floor. Kent State, they were able to win that turnover battle by a count of 15-9 as well. So nice easy win, nice easy cover there. And why IUPUI and Elon open up a pick, world will never know. Elon, they get a win, they get a cover by kind of 86-72, and then saw quite a few underdogs actually be able to come through on Friday. Robert Morris as about a 19 or so point underdog. They cover against Wisconsin 78-68. Wisconsin allowed Robert Morris to shoot 13 of 29 from three-point range. Now, Robert Morris did commit 21 turnovers. That costed them from being able to get an outright win, but DJ Wainwright, Long Jackson last. Well, they were not in last because they combined for 31 points, so they were able to do a rock-solid job on that front. Also being able to do a rock-solid job. How about Villanova in the Gavitt games? Maryland, they fall to 1-3. Ugly, ugly loss. 57-40 the final. Maryland shoots 24% from the floor, 5 of 26 from three-point range. They lose the battle on the glass, 35-28, even though Maryland won the turnover battle 17-12. Just a less than savory performance, and not like Villanova necessarily filled it up as well. They had 17 turnovers and 18 made field goals, but Tyler Burton, the transfer from Richmond, he was able to come through with 15 big points, so they're able to get to the window on that one. Also on the Gavitt games, rough one for Butler, 74-54. Michigan State finally able to get back in line. They're finally able to get their first cover of the season as they went 7-20 from three. That's more like what you expect Michigan State after they were shooting sub 30% from three entering into this one. Ty Walker was able to go off for 21 points, and you were able to get 11 rebounds out of the sophomore in Carson Cooper. Meanwhile, for Butler, just 32 total rebounds. Posh Alexander, 8 points, 4 turnovers, 2 assists. Just not going to be able to get the job done, and Michigan State was able to stifle there. Kansas State, they get a nice overtime win over Providence. That was out in the Bahamas, 73-70. As for Providence, they lose this game due to some bad variance as well. 5 of 22 from three-point range for Providence. They win the turnover battle 20-15. They win the rebound battle 44-39. But the Kansas State Wildcats, they had a guy by the name of Tyler Perry. You've seen him on the silver screen. Now you're seeing him on the hardwood. 24 points, going 14 of 14 at the free throw line. Providence was relatively solid at the line as well, 17 of 24, but that's always a big giant difference maker. And when it comes to these early games, sometimes the biggest difference makers is whether or not you have experience. And right now, St. John's does not have any of that. 88-81. Dayton is able to get the win, even with Malachi Smith out of the fold. The Dayton offense, it looked very crisp. Now, they did play quite a bit of isolation in this one, but Kobe Elvis was able to help out with 10 points. You had Deron Holmes, coupled with Nate Santos, combined for 39 points. They both grabbed 5 rebounds apiece. Joel Soriano did his part with a double-double, 21 points, 19 rebounds. But even with Dayton without their main point guard, they won the turnover battle 14-11. And for St. John's, you had Jordan Dingle go off for 14 points, did a relatively solid job, but for Dayton as well. How about Kobe Brea coming in off the bench, 10 points, 6 boards. That was very paramount for them as they were able to get that one to the window. You were also able to see getting to the window on this one, Miami, as they get a win and a cover against Georgia, 79-67. That was also out there in the Bahamas for Miami. They go just 7-24 from three-point range. A little bit cold for their standards thus far this season, but Wooga Poplar just continues to be one of the more underrated players in all of college basketball. 13 points, 11 rebounds, while Georgia, 9-31 from three-point range. You did have a 13.5 rebound performance out of Jabari Abdul-Rahim, but this has been a Georgia team that has had their struggles thus far this season. 18 points off the bench from Blue Kane. That was a relatively nice sign, but Georgia looks like they're going to be in for a relatively rough year, and this was an interesting upset as well. Gardner Webb pulls it off against Weber State by kind of 62-61. Weber State was about a 5.5 point favorite. Dylan Jones did his part. He supplies 24 points, 9 boards, 3 steals. Problem is, everyone else around him didn't do a whole heck of a lot of anything. And then you had on the flip side, 27 big ones from Julian Sombrero. Hopefully I said that one correctly. I always get that last name incorrect. But for Mr. Julian, we're just going to call him by his first name, 27 points. You had additionally 16 points out of Caleb Robinson. And for Gardner Webb, they've always had their issues at the free throw line. They went 4 of 13 in this one, but they went 6 of 15 from three-point range. So they shot better from three-point range than they did at the free throw line. Their physical play, able to get it done. Speaking of physical play, we always expect that out of Houston. They close as right around 9 to 9.5 point favorites, and they cover all numbers against Utah. 76-66 a final. You can tell that Houston still trying to get used to one another in the backcourt, but it's coming along very well. LJ Cryer was able to log 14 points, and then Jamal Shedd, just a stat sheet sufferer. He did have 4 turnovers, but 14 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, 3 steals, and for Utah, they just had a tough time taking care of the ball with 15 turnovers. You did have Brandon Carlson be able to log 17 points and 29 out of Gabe Madsen. You can't be counting on that night in and night out, but they were able to get in. You saw Oklahoma State with a relatively bad loss, 66-64. Notre Dame is able to get it done. A very new look and young Notre Dame team was able to ride the 20 big points of Marcus Burton to the window, as for Oklahoma State, 5 of 25 from 3. Javon Small, he went 4 of 8 from 3. That means that the rest of the team was 1 of 17. So a rough start to the season for Oklahoma State. I have to be wondering if you're going to be seeing our good friend and Mr. Mike Boynton on a little bit of a hot seat, as that has been a little bit less than terrific. What has been terrific, though, is taking a look at James Madison. We'll talk about them a little bit more in segment number 2 with Mid-Major Matt, but they get a close win, 76-73 against Radford. Don't sleep on this Radford team as well. We're giving a lot of love to James Madison, and these underdogs / these mid-majors are pulling off big outright wins, and Radford is right now 2-3, but they've been playing some good basketball as well. DeQuan Smith hauled in their 20 points. Keenan Giles was able to log 15 for James Madison. The reason why they won this game, they won the turnover battle by kind of 17-9 because they were a bit off with their shooting. You figured that there would be a little bit of regression there, 6 of 24 from 3, but they do find a way to be able to get it done. Also being able to find a way to get it done, East Tennessee State, 5.5-point home underdogs against a Davidson team that they looked very good over the weekend, getting that win over Maryland. They then were hanging in there against Clemson, but on this night, it was ETSU that was able to control things because they won the rebound battle, 42-32. Jaden Parker, the transfer from North Florida, was able to have 12 rebounds. Can't say I'm necessarily overly bullish on this East Tennessee team, but that was a relatively solid win for them. This was also a very solid win. Michigan is a team that I've been raving about on the show, and I was saying, hey, there's not too many teams I'd be putting as a favorite against Michigan. Well, apparently Long Beach State should have been. 94-86. Long Beach State goes on the road and gets the win. Trayer squared was very good. Lucina Trayer, 12 points, 10 rebounds. Abakar Trayer, 4 steals, 4 blocks, 15 points for Michigan. They did have Teach Me How to Dougie McDaniel really go off, 20 points, 6 assists, but for Michigan, they were forced into 16 turnovers compared to the 12 of Long Beach State. This really looks like a good team out there in the Big West, especially with UC Santa Barbara, dealing with some of their ailments with AJ Mitchell and company, so big time win for them. In a little bit of a intra-state rivalry, Florida absolutely pounded the tar out of Florida State, 89-68 the final. Typically when you get these interstate rivalries, you see better games in general. Florida got up 36-9, and from there it was curtains. The biggest lead that I saw in this one was 64-33. As for Florida State, they go just 2 of 13 from 3-point range, but more importantly, Florida, they just could not miss in the first half. Walter Clayton, he led the way with 19 points, but you were able to get 10 rebounds off the bench out of Thomas Ha. You were able to get some good production out of Tyree Samuel, 15 points, 7 rebounds, so everything was working on this day for Florida. And then you saw a pair of totals that reached north of 170. The Iowa versus Arkansas State total, that went under, 88-74 the final, as that just got a little bit away from us with regards to that total. That just went a little bit too high. As for Iowa, they go just 2 of 12 from 3-point range, but they also went 32 of 46 at the free throw line. Arkansas State very much playing a scorcher style, as every single one of their starters had at least 3 fouls in this one. They're certainly a team that you do want to be taking note of in terms of their interesting style of play, to say the least. The other one, Arizona versus Belmont, that falls just under as well. This closed right around about 172 or so, 100-68 the final, as the biggest reason why this total went under is that Arizona only scored 11 points in the final 8:45 of the game, because this game was very much decided and handled. Belmont does go 12 of 27 from 3-point range. By the way, you did have 21 points out of Malik Diaz. For Belmont, they were catching about 25.5 to 26 in this game. They don't cover that number because you're also able to have off the bench Montejus Krivas, hopefully I said that correctly, go for 20 points, 9 rebounds for Arizona's Caleb Love. He does his thing with 20 points. Arizona playing at breakneck pace, so they're going to be a lot of fun to watch moving forward and going to be a lot of fun to see what San Diego State does this year. They took that early loss against BYU, but now St. Mary's has taken a pair of losses. San Diego State absolutely pounds them 79-54 out here in lovely Las Vegas, as for St. Mary's, just 6 of 24 from three-point range. Aidan Mahaney, Alex Dusas, they combined for 15 points. Meanwhile, for San Diego State, Jaden Ladiaz became the man for this team. 25 points, 8 rebounds. So that was very beneficial for them. We did see a pair of Pac-12 teams that were laying double figures get covers. Oregon was all over Tennessee State by a count of 92-67. For Oregon, they've been dealing with the injury to N'Faly Dante. He is still out of the fold, but they went 9 of 20 from three-point range. And for Tennessee State, they were unable to follow prosperity, going on the road and knocking off Portland days earlier as they went 4 of 20 from three-point range. And then for Stanford, it was looking like early on it might be actually another bad upset for them as they got down double figures very early against Eastern Washington, but order was restored 95-70 as Eastern Washington goes 13 of 29 from 3. Stanford 12 of 25 from 3. I would say watch for regression with both of those teams, but for Stanford, they won the battle on glass 39-28. The guy that was really able to help out with that, James Keefe, he was able to come in for 12 rebounds, and you had Andrei Stojakovic be able to supply 18 points, goes 3 of 6 from three-point range, and then our DK Network write-up streak ended at 6. We're going to look to build a new one. I took 3.5 points with San Francisco against Grand Canyon. With the San Francisco bunch, they were covering the number from, I would say, 3 minutes remaining in the first half up until the final 15 seconds. If you watch this one, absolute brutality. San Francisco up with 3 minutes remaining in the game, and as to show you, we are all prone to variance. As for San Francisco, 7 of 23 from 3. Grand Canyon was off themselves, 6 of 24 from distance, but Tyon Grant Foster was able to take over this game, 28 points, 7 rebounds for San Francisco. They did not execute down the stretch, and they did lose a rebound battle by a count of 43-36, but you did see a nice show from Marcus Williams, Mongolian Mike, who combined for 36 points. They did very well until about the final 3 or so minutes, which is where things went a little bit haywire, and things very nearly got haywire for Ole Miss, but they hang on against Sam Houston State. 70-67 the final as Sam Houston State 10 of 26 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Ole Miss, they go just 3 of 18 from distance, but 27 of 34 at the free throw line to be able to overcome, and they also won the rebound battle by kind of 35-31. And if you are taking a look at college basketball right now, we have still been seeing a lot of overs, so the unders are starting to come back a little bit. Bookmakers have done a good job of being able to adjust some of these totals. We're down to 51.9% of games going over the total. 276 overs, 256 unders, and I believe we're at 6 pushes. We might be at 7, but I think we're at 6. Home underdogs have actually been doing terrible in college basketball, by the way. Gets the spread. Home underdogs, 41, 43, and 1. But favorites, they continue to be relatively solid, 274, 257, and 8 against the spread. So that's what we're seeing in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Friday. Now let's turn it forward to Saturday. Let's talk with our good friend Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, about what we're seeing with the Virginia area teams. Take a look at how to gauge these events out there in unfamiliar territory with a lot of these non-conference tournaments going on and so much more. That's up next. Right here on Customers with myself, David Peters, and now a part of the Houston Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cups and Cuts Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Houston Family Podcast. It is always great to be joined by this man as we've got Matt Josephs. You know him better as Mid-Major Matt aboard, doing tremendous work, taking a look at this great game of college basketball He joined me a lot on my baseball podcast throughout the season, which he does a great job on that front. He does a great job over at ESPN Radio Richmond with the show Border to Border, FTN Network, Athlon Sports, you name it, he does it, and you're able to follow Matt on Twitter/X over at MidMajorMatt altogether, and it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yes, this is always the fun time, college football and college basketball at the same time. Some campuses diving into both sports, some campuses diving into one. It's always a great time.
Oh, it certainly is. I know that you're out there relatively close to the James Madison area. Unfortunate that they had their waiver denied for a bowl game. That's not great, to say the least, from the NCAA, but I mean, their football, their basketball programs, both off to a nice start to the season. And I know that overall in college basketball, you are as well. And now we're at that time where we've got a lot of these multi-team events. We've got a lot of these tournaments out there in the great state of South Carolina. Next week, we're getting the Battle for Atlanta, Maui Invitational. You go down the list. And when it comes to your handicapping, how do you approach these non-conference tournaments? Because they just feel like they've got a little bit of a different vibe than just your normal regular season games, whether that be in conference or out of conference.
Yeah, certainly. And it's interesting because you get a lot of shorter lines. You get a lot of totals, like it's played in a home stadium. And a lot of these tournaments go under, it feels like, because of the unfriendly rims, the new environments and things like that. I noticed that a lot of your spreadsheets and stuff, you have a lot of unders based on these tournaments because of those exact factors. So you kind of have to look at who you think is better, who's going to travel better, who's going to have more fans in these arenas, who's used to this sort of thing. Going to Maui is not exactly an easy trip. There's probably a lot of teams or coaches or players who want to have a little bit more fun than play these games. So you kind of have to figure out who's been there before, who's the more veteran bunch, who will treat it more like a business trip, which gives you opportunities to take some of these teams at shorter numbers than you would get maybe at home or on the road.
Yep, absolutely. And always a friendly reminder with this year's Maui Invitational that it's actually going to be at the Sand Sheriff Center, which a little bit unfortunate. All the folks out there in Maui that had to deal with those fires. Hopefully we'll get that back next year. But good to see that is going to be still out there in the great state of Hawaii. But I'm right there with you. I do take a look at these just foreign environments, I think is the best way of putting it. It always does make it very interesting. And when it comes to taking a look at these multi-team events, when it comes to these tournaments, I know you were talking about teams that treat it a little bit more like a business trip. Is this a certain time where you do want to be taking a look at more of these veteran teams with a lot of juniors and seniors as opposed to, say, either A, freshman-laden teams, or B, a team like St. John's, for example, which, yes, they do have veterans, but it's a new-look team that is trying to come together chemistry-wise.
Yeah, certainly. You want teams that have been together, and obviously a lot more teams entering the season are doing the foreign trips and things like that, and they do the bonding sessions. Those are the people who are becoming the most wild card of the bunch. Of course, you've got St. John's, who's a really talented bunch, but they're still kind of learning how to play with each other. My beloved Syracuse Orange, their trip, they've got a bunch of tough opponents. There's a lot of stars on that team, a lot of good talent, but they've still got to bond together. So you almost also want to look and see, like, even if the teams are losing, like, are you seeing glimpses of what they could be in the past? Can they carry over what they did in these MTEs and in these tournaments to their first couple of games back home? Yeah, it's certainly teams that you want continuity for, and certainly, teams that are going to focus in and treat this like a business trip. This is when you always want to read the quotes, whether it's the coaches' quotes or the players' quotes. Like, are they saying, "Oh, I'm excited to go to the beach," or "I'm excited to take on, number 7, da-da-da"?
Yep, I think that is very key and always very important to be diving in on. As joining me on the show, we do have Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Matt, certainly we're going to be diving in a lot on these tournaments, and we'll take a look at a few of those games in just a couple of minutes. But that said, in terms of what we've all gotten this season, there have been a few surprises here in the first week and a half of the season. Have there been any teams that really stood out in particular that either you're a little bit stock up or stock down on based on what we have seen?
Well, I was high on Virginia entering the season because I thought that this was the roster that Tony Bennett would really appreciate. The talent that was brought in, the younger guys are getting a little bit older here. You get a guy like Reese Beekman, who is a tremendous leader, and talking to the players and the coaches when I was down in Charlotte ACC Media Day, I was really convinced in this team. And look, obviously 3 of their 4 games were against horrendous opponents, but the win against Florida on a neutral court certainly telling me it's a lot of things. I'll be interested to see how they play on Monday against Wisconsin in a game that I feel like should always be banned because it's usually like 57-52 and it makes me, hate basketball. But I really like what this Virginia team does because over the years when I talk to Tony Bennett, he says his pack line defense takes more time to install. There's people who are learning it as the season goes along. Defense looks pretty good so far, 50, 70, 51, and 33 against their 4 opponents. opponents. So I really like this Virginia team. I thought they had Final Four potential, and so far they've kind of showed me that they do have Final Four potential.
I like what I've been able to see out of them, and I do have a few question marks with some of the guys that they brought in via the transfer portal. I was wondering how someone like an Andrew Rohde would be able to do as an up transfer along Jordan Minor, but you know that Jordan Minor, back when he was at Merrimack, he was very, very major, and so far so good out of them. And I do want to get your thoughts as well at a team that I was hinting at a little bit before, and we are doing this, truth be told, before their game for Friday finish up, but what have you made out of James Madison, since I know you're out there in more of the Richmond, Virginia area, but not too far away, and they've really been a team that's just stood out to me so much of the positive.
Yeah, talking to Coach Byington, I had him on Tuesday after that Michigan State game and kind of getting the sense that he really loves this team, and he was really worried about that trip to Kent State. And it's funny, I was talking to him, and as he was on the bus on his way to Kent State, and look, I thought they were going to lose that game, overcoming what they had to overcome and winning that game in 2 overtimes. Look, obviously the defense is a bit of an issue, but, sometimes when you can outscore opponents, at least early on, until you figure out the defensive side, that's always a good recipe here. And yes, you talk about the Radford game. Radford's been an interesting team so far. They hung with North Carolina for a little bit. They were ahead of VCU in that last game and then got a terrible second half. Radford making their way through the state of Virginia, it feels like, with their schedule here. But yeah, I really like this James Madison team. One question I have is they don't have a ton of tests out of conference, so we'll see how they could kind of carry that into the Sun Belt, who has some sneaky good teams themselves.
Yeah, they certainly do have some sneaky good teams with the Sun Belt as well. That's one of the conferences where I feel like a team could very easily go from worst to first as well. So that I do think is going to be a very interesting conference landscape as well. You've got a Marshall team that I like as well. They've been a little bit up and down here in the first week or two of the season, but all in all, I do think that there's a good outlook for them. As joining me on the show, we do have Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, and I do think that we've got ourselves an interesting slate on Saturday. Certainly we don't have as many rambunctious games as we had for Friday, as Friday it was able to deliver a nice 80-game slate in general, and we are still a little bit TBD on like the Arizona tip-off games, the Paradise Jam as well, but I do think that there are some interesting games to take a look at, and one of these games that's currently off the board that I think is going to be of intrigue is this Gardner-Webb versus Colgate game, because I know that you do a great job of diving in a lot on these mid-majors, and Colgate, year in and year out, they're always such a good three-point shooting team. Meanwhile, Gardner-Webb, their offense typically lags a little bit, but they're typically very good on defense. What do you make out of a matchup like this? Like I said, we're doing this without numbers, but I do feel like this could be a game that might be a little bit closer than what many might think.
Yeah, it's interesting to see entering this game on Friday to see that Gardner-Webb's opponents, it was Arkansas and Baylor, only 22% of their shots came from three-point land. So I don't know necessarily if that was they were getting easier baskets towards the rim, they were getting easier shots towards the two, or were they cutting off the three-point line, which would make Colgate a little bit, struggle a little bit, because obviously Colgate, that's what they want to do. It's funny because I was talking to Syracuse's coach as an alum in Charlotte at ACC Media Day, and I said, Coach, listen, you've got to either stop scheduling Colgate or we got to stop losing to these guys. And thankfully, we came back and beat them. But yeah, it's a Colgate team that you kind of expect. They shoot a lot of threes. They run their offense very precisely. Their defense is all right. It's not great. It's not horrendous. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, obviously, neutral court, who can handle that sleepy environment. It probably won't have a lot of fans. Colgate has a lot of seniors, a lot of guys who have probably played in MTEs like this. So that's certainly going to be an edge here. And when you look, of course, you look at Ken Palm's numbers here. And as you said, this is based off of without having the game on Friday. He's calling this to be a very tight game here, 76-75 score. In that case, if we get a really tight line, I'll probably lean towards Colgate depending upon what happens on Friday night.
Yep, and with this Colgate team, they always do just such a good job of being able to reload as well. They lose Nellie Cummings 2 seasons ago. They were rock solid last season. Now they've got Braden Smith as a little bit of a do-it-all guy. They always find that one featured guard, which is something that I do like that they're able to bring to the table. Something else I do like is taking a look at this Temple Owls team. They opened up as 10.5-point favorites. They're now right around 11.5-point favorites going up against Columbia. And I'm not sure what you feel about this one, but I've been noticing that a lot of big favorites have been coming through. By big favorites, I mean a little bit closer to like 15, 20-point favorites. But I look at Temple and I feel like they should be more like a 15 to a 20-point favorite in this one with the way that Columbia just time and time again has struggled on the road. And I actually like what I've seen out of this Temple team early on in the Adam Fisher era.
I agree with you as we talk about my Philadelphia team from my hometown here and have seen many a Temple game. And the one thing you kind of have to consider, and some people who are not familiar with some of these teams may have to look at, you see a home team and you see Temple. Unfortunately for Temple, they do not have much of a home court advantage. They play better as a team there, but they don't exactly have the crowd support as they like to do. Adam Fisher was trying to bribe the students with some pizza if he got 5,000, I believe, on that opening night game against Maryland Eastern Shore. So, yeah, they are home. And the best part is they're winning the games that they didn't win last year. They lost to Maryland Eastern Shore last year. That Drexel game, probably last year they would have lost, and they didn't lose it. The thing that kind of stays consistent with this team, they play really solid defense. They make you work. These are long possessions that they force you to go through. Their offense still isn't great. Hasier Miller, I watched the last game and I saw stretches where he was really good. He was, taking care of all of the players as a point guard should. He was passing it off. And then all of a sudden there was a stretch of about 2 or 3 possessions where he was doing the wrong thing. So he's kind of one of these hot and cold guys. Jaleel White is hot and cold. They have a shooter in Matteo Piccarelli. I really like Steve Settle. That was because I, as a guy who watched a lot of Howard and bet on a lot of Howard overs last year, was very familiar with Steve Settle. It's a team that looks pretty good. The problem with them in these big numbers is if they go ice cold, then they're just not going to cover, especially at home where there's just not much of an atmosphere. You look at Columbia, they play fast, but they don't score. They're 337th in 2-point percentage, and obviously that's only accounting for 2 games because they played 2 games against 2 Bard and SUNY Delhi. The numbers don't look very good, so this could be an under here. I don't know. It's a high number, and I know Columbia plays fast, but it could be an under here potentially.
Yep, I don't disagree with you there for Columbia. They typically play a little bit more up-tempo, but they really don't have a lot of shot makers that call it what it is. Geronimo Rubio de la Rosa is pretty much the only guy that's able to put the ball in the basket for them. So I do think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue. And when it comes to this one as well, for this Columbia team, they have lost 8 straight games on the road, and they have lost all of them by 9+ points. So really hard to be looking anywhere other than Temple here, as we do have Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this is another one that I think is very intriguing. It's a VCU versus Seattle game. There's a few books that have a number up on this game, with it being VCU being between a 7 to a 7.5 point favorite. And what do you make out of this VCU team? Because I think very early on throughout the season, you can tell that Coach Odom, he was really banking on Sharon Barisal being out there and being able to give the team some nice scoring pop from 3. And I feel like VCU has really missed them with him being out due to injury.
If you listen to the VCU fans who listen to my show, they after the first loss, they were ready to fire Ryan Odom, and especially after that first half against Samford where they didn't look very good, they were really unhappy. But then they came back, and obviously the Radford first half was close and Radford was winning, and then they absolutely shut them down in the second half. This Seattle team's very interesting, and the first thing that would have jumped out to me normally is I look at Seattle and see the 25.2% turnover percentage, and I'd be like, VCU's going to take advantage of that. Well, they're not playing havoc anymore. They're not pressing. They're not doing the things that are forcing a lot of turnovers. They're actually pretty good, 18.7%, but like for VCU, they're in the top 10 in this percentage every single year. And ironically, you look at Penn State where their head coach is, and Penn State is the one that's currently in the top 10 when it comes to turnover percentage. So obviously you're going to get a good crowd for VCU. VCU's going the Syracuse route, the non-conference route for that seems like everybody's doing. They're playing pretty much all home games except for that tournament in Florida where I was very disappointed they did not match up VCU and Penn State. That would have been really good, especially for the people here in Virginia. But I digress here. It's a VCU team that I think is going to gather some momentum from that second half against Radford. Seattle coming off of the loss against Northern Arizona. That was a head scratcher of a result here because this is a good Seattle team. And I like Cameron Tyson. I like some of their other guys. They're a veteran team, so they really shouldn't have lost to Northern Arizona at home. That might focus them up a little bit, but I like VCU coming off that second half against Radford to continue playing solid basketball at home where they usually are very good.
Yep, they typically are very good at home. And for the Seattle team, Cam Tyson is a guy that's able to put the ball in the basket. And it always feels like they just have a lot of guys around them that are trying to be more, for lack of a better term, more supplementary pieces as well. So we shall see if they're going to be doing a lot of that moving forward. And Matt, when it comes to the board that we do have for Saturday, like I was mentioning, it feels like it's a little bit more of a lots of steak, not a ton of sizzle sort of board, as we don't have as many of those like prime top 25 matchups or anything like that. But as well as I do, money is money, whether you're betting on Duke versus North Carolina or you're betting on New Mexico State versus Northern Colorado, for instance. But is there anything else that you are taking a look at for Saturday, whether it be a game that you've already bet or maybe it's a game that you haven't bet yet, but you have your eye on?
Southern Indiana LaSalle game. Southern Indiana last year was a team I enjoyed playing the over with and kind of at times getting in on them because obviously they were brand new to the Division I level. They lost pretty much everybody, it feels like, from last year, at least a lot of the talent from last year, and they certainly have gone off to a slow start, losing at home to Chicago State, an improved Chicago State, but still losing at home to Chicago State isn't exactly a good look. But the one thing I kind of notice here is their defense hasn't been very good. They've given up 74, 75, and 78 to all of their opponents so far. And then you look at this LaSalle team who's 3-0, but only a 6-point win against Drexel, only a 5-point win over Northeastern. They do get the 12-point win over Bucknell, but I feel like LaSalle is one of those teams that kind of, I don't know, has these opportunities every once in a while to kind of let their guard down a little bit. They've got Duke on the road on Tuesday. That is certainly a spotlight type game for the Explorers. So I'm trying to convince myself, and I haven't done it yet, and we'll see if it actually makes my card, but I'm trying to convince myself that maybe Southern Indiana is live in this game. And if they're not live, maybe we get an over here because maybe LaSalle takes it a little easy on them on the defensive side and we get to see some points. I think LaSalle will score on these guys, but if they're not focused, I think the defense could be the letdown spot with Duke coming up on Tuesday. So that's kind of a game I'm looking at. And then certainly, some of these other games that don't have lines yet. Nebraska and Oregon State's really interesting because we see what Nebraska has looked like so far. They started the season with so many injuries in their rotation, and these guys are slowly starting to come back. And Oregon State, it feels like, has new players every year when it comes to that. And, of course, you factor in the fact that they're playing in South Dakota. It's just really interesting there. And then, of course, Nevada and Portland, you look at Portland teams in the past, and this is not the Portland teams of the past because they've lost a lot of guys. Mikey Meadows is with St. Louis, but it's a Portland team under Shante Leggins that loves to run from time to time. They're coming off that tough loss against Tennessee State. Nevada will not take it easy on them. They want to play with a little bit of pace. So maybe if we can get some points from Portland, maybe that's an over at Nevada because I feel like Nevada is going to do a lot of scoring themselves.
Yeah, but with Nevada, it does feel like they're playing a little bit more up-tempo this year, and I love the way that Jared Lucas has been playing as well, and to your point with Portland as well, just a team that had Murphy's Law hit them last season. They are not as bad as that 2022-23 season record would indicate. A little bit of less than savory loss to Tennessee State, but I think Tennessee State has a legitimate chance to be able to win the OVC as well. So lots of great action on Saturday, and Matt, you're doing an amazing job taking a look at it all. You also do a tremendous job on the college football front during the baseball season. You always do a nice job joining that podcast that I do called the Baseball Betting Show, taking a look at so many props and doing a great job on that front as well. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, just 2 weeks left in the regular season in college football. That's a shame, but bowl season is always a lot of fun to handicap, and there's always value depending upon how you attack that stuff. And as I always say, we all have the same goal. We all want to beat the book, so certainly if you ever want to tweet me at MidMajorMatt, you can certainly do so. I do want to bring up one other thing. Obviously, as somebody who follows me on Twitter, one of my favorite bets in college basketball has been the Toledo team total over, which hit the first 2 games of the season. It did not hit in that Wright State game, but I'm really happy. Toledo lost a couple of guys this offseason. They brought some guys in. Of course, I'm very familiar with Ben White, who was at William & Mary. I'm really excited to see how they can do in this tournament out at Henderson with some better teams than they are, but they've already got some good wins here. So I'm interested to see where this Rockets team goes. They do have to improve on that 2-point percentage defense, 66.4% for the opponents. That's not going to win them a lot of games once we get to MAC play, but I am interested to see how they do in Henderson.
Yep, I am very interested as well with that Toledo team. They are the Rockets, and they are rocket ship when it comes to putting up points. Sometimes the defense needs to improve a little bit, but that said, they can always put them up, and a man that is always scoring for our bankrolls is Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt. Does an amazing job taking a look at this sport, and it's always great to get him aboard. Big thanks to Matt for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. I'm part of the Visa Family Podcast, and coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some big shows. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the Visa Family Podcast. Always great to be able to get Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, aboard. Does tremendous work over at FTM Bets. Does an amazing job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love over at ESPN Radio in Richmond as well. Athlon Sports, you go down the list. he checks every single box, and every single time he joins this podcast, lends tremendous insight. So big thanks to Matt for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Saturday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GNet_81. We are going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the games with 6 digits. This includes the Atlantic Sun, the MEAC, the SWAC, the Patriot League, the Northeast Conference, the Southland. These conferences, those are going to be at the bottom. That'll keep things all nice, clean, and easy. And then the games that were TBD going into the day yesterday that were decided based on the results on Friday, those are going to be at the bottom of the games with 3 digits on the normal board. So let's get things started with 601, 602 on the betting board. Georgetown is going to be playing us at Mount St. Mary's. The total on this game is staying between 137.5 to 138.5, with Georgetown finding them anywhere between 7.5 and 8.5 point favorites. And with Georgetown, I'm willing to lay up to 8 with them. Once we get up north of 8, that is a little bit of a point of no return for me. As for Georgetown, its team has looked a little bit lackluster coming out of the gates. They do have primary scores, so Jay Heath, Jaden Epps, these are guys who are able to give you a double-figure amount of points. They're relatively good three-point shooters, and they get to go up against a Mount St. Mary's team that is in transition in the backcourt. They lost Jalen Benjamin from a season ago, so Dakota LaFew has really become a primary guy for this team. But last year, put in there 13 points, shot 38% from 3, but now it's a play on the ball quite a bit more rather than off the ball, and you can tell that he has been a little bit less efficient in general, and also for this Mount St. Mary's team. Last few seasons, they've had really good low post play with the likes of Malik Jefferson and company, and now those guys are out of the fold. You're really relying upon George Shinsley to be able to hold it down low. He has been able to give the team 7.5 rebounds per game, but certainly is not quite the rebounder or just the glass eater that some of these guys have been in past years. And for Georgetown, a team with Supreme Cook who comes over from Fairfield, they should be able to win that battle down low. On top of that, with the Georgetown team, they have been able to get some good facilitation out of the aforementioned Jalen Epps as well. You're able to throw in there a little bit of Wayne Bristol Jr., 6'6" combo player who came over from Howard, who hasn't been much of a scorer, but is able to do the little things. He's able to give you like 5.5 boards, 1.7 steals per contest, and it does feel like this Georgetown team taking on a little bit more of that Ed Cooley style. They're not playing super duper up tempo. The only game that they have broken the 68-point plateau in thus far this season is against Lemoyne. Meanwhile, you've got a Mount St. Mary's team that perennially is one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. So I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a slog, especially with this being a noon Eastern time tip. I did, as a result, set my total at a 136.5, diving in on the under. And with Georgetown, willing to lay up to 8 points with them. 603, 604 on the betting board. You've got Little Rock, and they're playing against Northern Illinois. This is a game from the great state of Georgia. This is on the campus of Georgia State. Little Rock is a 2.5-point underdog on the open. Total is 160. Both of these teams had to play on Friday, so a lot of books are not going to be hanging a number on this until the AM. But that said, when I take a look at this spot, I did set Little Rock as the 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. They did a really nice job of bringing in some transfers during the offseason that can really help out this team. They bring in Mekhi Mitchell, one of the Mitchell brothers from Arkansas a season ago, to be able to help out down low, be able to grab a few rebounds, like what he's able to bring to the table. And then you've got a Northern Illinois team that, while the backcourt is very good, I like what David Coit is able to bring to the table. He's a high 30s three-point shooter that is able to give you 15-plus points per contest. Reek Nutter has always been able to give you some good scoring, a few rebounds, not too much of a three-point shooter. And you do bring in Nanik Konen Niederhauser, hopefully I said that correctly, the gentleman from Switzerland who has been able to give this Northern Illinois team north of 6 rebounds per game. I do think that Jameer Chaplin, coming in from South Florida, is very big for this team as well. A primarily defense-oriented player that has never really been a great three-point shooter, but is able to give a little bit of versatility. Is able to do a nice job guarding multiple positions. And then Kalen Robinson, who began his career at Arkansas, spent a year at Texas A&M, former top 200 recruit that just really couldn't get out there on the floor, has been able to do a nice job of helping hold it down in the backcourt as a bit of a facilitator. Is able to give you multiple steals per contest, as well. This all goes in tandem with D'Antoni Gordon, who is one of the main holdovers from the Little Rock team from a season ago. He was a starter for them along with Jordan Jefferson. Jefferson, a very good spot-up shooter that's shooting a career 39.5% from three with Northern Illinois. You do have quite a bit in the backcourt for this team, especially bringing in the DePaul transfer in Philman Geberwit. But at the same time, I do think that down low, Little Rock has a little bit of advantage. It does feel like this Little Rock team is coming together quite well as well. In their opening game against Texas State, they were able to get the job done there. And for Northern Illinois, I have my question marks with regards to this defense. So I do think that Little Rock, they're going to be a little bit more slow this year than they have been in past years. And with the added size down low, I think that they hold this total under, and I think that they're going to be able to get the job done. So I did set Little Rock as a 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. I did set my total at 153. Also going to be diving in on the under. 605, 606 on the betting board. Cleveland State is on the road facing off against Eastern Michigan. Eastern Michigan is a underdog of 7 points, and your total is anywhere between 143 and 144. And with this total, I set mine at a 146.5. I'm going to be looking at the over. Got an Eastern Michigan team that has one of the least efficient defenses in all of college basketball dating back to last season. And for this Cleveland State bunch, they have been looking to play a little bit more up-tempo. They're a bunch that is able to generate quite a few steals, especially on the road dating back to a season ago. And Mr. Dodal Tristan Aruna, he's able to do a nice job of just stuffing the stat sheet. He doesn't shoot it well from three-point range, but season ago had 15.5 points, 6.5 boards, a block, a steal per contest, and he is duplicating those numbers thus far this season. You've been able to have the likes of Drew Lauder, Tate Williams, a pair of guys that put in there a double-figure amount of points last season, be able to elevate off of that this season and are shooting much better from three. Cleveland State currently shooting just below 39% from three after a season ago. They were more of a 31% three-point shooting team. I do think we should see a little bit of regression to the mean, but this team, they do a good job of being able to force turnovers. They don't turn it over a lot themselves, and then you do have an Eastern Michigan team that they do have a little bit of a tough time down low, but it's not like Cleveland State necessarily has ideal size as well. Legend Geeter is able to give you about 4 boards per contest along Jared Billingsley, and I do think what's going to be able to keep Eastern Michigan in this game, Ty Acuff. Began his career at Duquesne where he was a good sharpshooter last season, had about 14.5 points per contest. He has really been the go-to guy for his Eastern Michigan team, and he's gotten some help from the Slovenian freshman and Arne Osojnik. Hopefully I said that correctly. He's been able to give the team a little bit over 11 points per contest, like what he's able to bring to the table. And for Eastern Michigan, this has always been a relatively solid three-point shooting team thus far this season, shooting just 28% from three-point range. Season ago, they were a little bit rough to say the least, but that's because Amani Bates was just hoisting away from three-point range recklessly, taking a bunch of shots. And I do think that for Eastern Michigan, they are going to be able to hold in this game against the Cleveland State bunch that while they generate a lot of turnovers, I think that they're going to get a little bit loose with the ball themselves, and still I think is doing for a little bit of regression with regards to their shooting as well. And I do think that for Eastern Michigan being able to crank up their offense after they were able to get a nice win last week over Georgia Southern, is able to elevate this team. So we'll take 7 or more with Eastern Michigan, set them as a 6.5 point underdog, and I do think that this game is going to be close enough to be able to get a little bit of late game fouling. I did set my total at a 146.5, so I'm going to be going in on the over, and I'm going to be taking 7 or more with Eastern Michigan. 607, 608 on the betting board. It is Monmouth, and they play us at Princeton. Princeton is a favorite of between 6.5 and 7 points, and your total between 139 and 139.5. I set Princeton as a 10-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this number. I am very impressed by what I've been seeing out of Princeton thus far this season, and you do have a Monmouth bunch that they were able to pull off a nice win or two to be able to begin the season as Xander Rice comes back to play for his father and King Rice. Great story there as he's been able to elevate this offense that was one of the worst in all of college basketball a season ago, but still very much do have my question marks with everyone around Mr. Rice, and perhaps you do have Monmouth being a little bit overhyped after that win against West Virginia, a team that's in just all sorts of chaos, as Princeton already wins over Rutgers on a neutral court and on the road against Hofstra and Duquesne, being able to hold all 3 of these teams at 67 points or fewer. They're doing a great job on the glass with Camden Pierce being able to give you 12.7 rebounds per game. They do lose Keyshawn Kellman from a season ago, but Matt Loco, he has been going a loco. This guy is able to give you about 19 points per contest. His three-point shooting can sometimes be a little bit hit or miss. Last year was about a 38% three-point shooter, and this year he's shooting 57% from three. I don't think that he's going to be able to shoot 57% throughout the entirety of the campaign. But, I mean, even though you do lose the likes of a Tyson Avalman from last season, who was a good point forward, Xavion Lee has become a good trigger man in the offense as well. And then for Xander Rice, he just has had to become a Mr. Do-It-All for the team, because you've got Jack Collins, who's able to give you a few steals, and he's put in there 17.6 rebounds per game. Past Rice and Collins, nobody else is averaging more than 6.5 points or 4.5 rebounds per game. So you really do need a little bit of help in general. Gotten a little bit of facilitation out of Jakari Spence, but this is a Monmouth team that is very, very top-heavy. They don't necessarily have ideal size to match up with Princeton down low, and I do think that in a game, for lack of a better term, that it's probably going to be 2, maybe 3 on 5. I think that Princeton takes it to Monmouth on the road. I said Princeton as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the number. Princeton has been one of the most efficient defenses in all of college basketball. Monmouth not looking to crank it up tempo and has limited scoring options, so semi-total 135, diving down on the under and taking Princeton laying the number. 609, 610 on the betting board. It is Evansville, and they play us at Ball State. Ball State is a pick 'em to a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and your total is there between 143.5 and 144.5. With Ball State, I did set them as a 3.5 point favorite, so going to be willing to take them as a favorite / a pick 'em. When it comes to Ball State, this team has been a little bit all over the place in the last few seasons. They lose a few solid 3-point shooters from a season ago, but what they really have is Jalen Anderson. Jalen Anderson, who comes over from old Loyola Marymount, was a part-time starter for them last year that put in their 10 points per contest. Career about 34% 3-point shooter that has been able to give out a little bit of facilitation. As a freshman, when he was with the Mount, he was able to give out 3.5 assists per contest, and he has been really Mr. Do-It-All for the team, along with Mikey Pearson Jr. He's 6'7" combo player that season ago shot about 33% from 3-point range. He's a nice floor spacer for a Ball State team that you can tell they're looking to play a little bit more slowly. They're looking to really pound teams on defense, as they've given up 68 points for fear in their first 3 games of the season, going up against an Evansville team that they themselves have given up 64 or fewer in each of their first 3 games. Now, both of these teams have gone up against, let's call it what it is, outmatched competition, which is why their defensive numbers are a little bit elevated. But with this Evansville team, you've got down low the French gentleman. He is seen to me, who's 6'10". He's able to give you a block. He was able to log about 5 to 6 rebounds per game 8 seasons ago. And then you've got someone like Kenny Strawberry, who just can't shoot threes to save his life. He shot 50% from 3 in the first 2 games of the season last year. Shot more like 25% from 3. He's going to fade off with that regard, but he gives you some rebounds. He's able to give you a double-figure amount of points, able to drive into the rim, and for this Evansville team, overall they're shooting about 34% from 3. They've cleaned up some of the turnovers while they themselves are doing a nice job of being able to turn other teams over, but I do think that Anderson is going to be the best player out there on the floor. And additionally, for Ball State, they've got a nice glue guy in Trent Milton that is coming as a freshman, and he's just been doing the little things, giving you like 6 points, 3 boards, a few assists, a steal. That's what I'd like to see, and I think that you just have a little bit more general depth when it comes to this Ball State backcourt, including having Quincy Adams coming in as a 6'5", little bit of a combo player that I do think is going to be able to elevate this team as well. Semi-total 143.5, here at the 144.5, diving in on the under. Both of these teams been playing at a little bit more of a slow tempo, and with Ball State, I think that they get it done, willing to lay up to 3 with them. This is going to be the DK Network Rider pick, 6'11", 6'12 on the betting board. It is tempo, and we give our ode to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, as they play us Columbia. Columbia is a 11 to an 11.5 point underdog. Your total is between 147.5 and 148. If you date it back to the beginning of Ivy League Conference play last season, Columbia has played 8 road games. They have lost all 8 by at least 9 points in every one of them. They have not been good, to say the least, on the road, and we were alluding to it with our good friend and mid-major Matt. This does feel like one of those lines that should be closer to like 15 to 16. I set mine at a 16, my Rider pick. That is going to be laying a rather hefty number here with Temple. I recognize that Temple is a team that's in a little bit of transition, but right now they're doing the little things well. This team is in the top 20 in the country in terms of free throw shooting percentage, shooting a little bit over 82% at the free throw line. They're a top 30 team with regards to fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and they're going up against a Columbia team of which is 301st in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now with Columbia, they've actually shot it quite well at the free throw line as well, but I don't think that Columbia is going to be getting to the charity stripe too much against a Temple team that has been rock solid on defense in their first 3 games of the season, giving up 68 points or fewer in every one of them. them. Heiser Miller, he has looked really good to be beginning the campaign as he has been able to log about 18 points per contest. Absolutely love what he's able to bring to the table. You're able to couple that with some of the returning pieces from a season ago, pairing well with the likes of a Steve Settle III, who he was over at Howard a season ago. Just a good rebounder in general that was able to pop threes a season ago. You could tell that they were trying to turn him into a little bit more of a primary post player, which I think is big as they go up against a Columbia team that are just getting decimated on the glass. Blair Thomas, who is a former top 350 recruit, is right now leading the way with about 4.3 rebounds per game. It's a Temple team that has been relatively solid on the glass. Columbia, they are in the bottom 50 in the country in terms of rebound rate, and as a result, they're also 287th in the country in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. You've been able to have Jaleel White for this Temple team be Mr. Do-It-All, 8.5 boards, 14 points per contest. I really like the way that these guys have integrated into a Fisher system that we saw him be one of the architects of, that great Penn State offense from a season ago. They don't necessarily shoot it tremendously from three, but they don't beat themselves, and Columbia, they beat themselves. Columbia's numbers are a little bit artificial because they took down two very bad non-Division I schools. They held like Bard to 36 points, and then they played against SUNY Delhi or something like that. So that's the reason why Columbia is right now 2-2. This team has been absolutely awful on the road, and I think that is going to continue. I'm willing to lay up to about 15.5 here with Temple, so getting them at 11.5. My DK Network right to pick is going to be laying the points with Temple. Temple not looking to play super up-tempo. You notice that with Fisher when he was a part of that Penn State coaching staff a season ago, and for Columbia, they're just an inefficient offense in general. So going to be taking a look at the under. Set my total at 144 on my right to pick. That is laying the points with Temple. 6-13, 6-14 on the betting board. It is Detroit, and they are going to be playing on the road against Ohio. Ohio finds themselves as a favorite of anywhere between 16 to 16.5 points. Totals between 153.5 and 154.5. When it comes to Ohio, can I set them as a 14-point favorite? I'm going to be willing to take the points. This Ohio team certainly is going to be able to win that battle down low, as I do like that in year number 2 in this system, Gabe Witznitzer, who began his career at Louisville, has been able to give you a little bit more rebounding. He and Elmore James have really been able to do a solid job on that front, as Elmore James and Witznitzer are combining for 11.5 rebounds per game. And then you've got Jalen Hunter, who's doing a nice job as a primary point guard. A little bit less of a scorer than the guys that you've had in past years like Jason Preston, Mark Sears and company, but he's done a nice job throwing in there 12 points. Not necessarily going to shoot it great from three-point range, but that's why you've got the AJs. AJ Brown and AJ Clayton have been able to do a pretty tremendous job, with Brown 18 points per contest, currently shooting 71% from three-point range. It should taper off. He last year shot about 37.5% from three. I could see him shooting 40%, but not necessarily that high. And then AJ Clayton a season ago shot more in the mid-30s from three-point range. He's logging 10.5 points per game. We've seen Sharif Mitchell be able to integrate himself in the system, but Isaiah Cornish, who's come over from Maryland, it's giving you a big giant nothing burger, and I do think that for Detroit, they have found their next go-to scorer. He's not quite Antoine Davis, but Jaden Stone a season ago shot 52% from three before going out with an injury. 13 games into the season, he's been able to log a little bit over 20 points per contest. Prior to him going out with injury a season ago, was logging about 14 points, 6 boards per contest, and Eduardo Del Cadia, who comes over from the country of Italy. He has actually been very solid down low. Began his career at UNLV and Nichols. Couldn't see a lot of run with those teams, but I mean, he's a 6'8" skilled big man that's able to pop some threes. He's been able to give the team 6 boards, a double-figure amount of points per game. So, like what they've been able to bring to the table. And Donovan Totley, who, I mean, this is a well-traveled gentleman. He was really good for Chattanooga during the 2018-19 season, and then he dealt with a bunch of injuries. He tried to go to Monmouth. It wasn't necessarily a fit there, but he is back to what he was seemingly 500 years ago, being able to dish out the ball. I do think that Detroit has a little bit of upside. Took them a few games to be able to get things going against Toledo and Cincinnati. They got crushed, but they very nearly went outright on the road against Ole Miss. And this is an Ohio defense that last year was very lackadaisical, to say the least. They are having some issues thus far this season. So I do think that we're going to get a little bit of a higher total. I think we've gone a tad too far because Detroit, even though they do score their points and they do give them up as well, they're not necessarily a super duper up-tempo team. So I set my total at 152, diving in on the under, with Ohio can only make them a 14-point favorite. So going to be taking a look at the points and going to be diving in on the total under. As we go to 615, 616 on the betting board, it is VCU, and they're going to be playing against Seattle. Your total on this game, finding it anywhere between a 134.5 to a 136 end with VCU across the board. They are a 7-point favorite, and I'm going to be looking at the points with Seattle. I did set this line at a 4.5. I was talking about it a little bit with Matt. The fact that Sean Barisau being out of the fold, I think, is a big deal for this VCU team. Max Scholga has been able to put the ball in the basket last year. Was about a 40% three-point shooter that came over from Utah State with Ryan Odom, but you tell that this is a little bit of a makeshift team in which you've got a little bit of a lack of chemistry because they are currently without someone in Barisau that knew the system, was going to be able to give them a nice shooting option from the outside. So instead you've had to mix and match a little bit more down low. You've been able to get some relatively okay production of Jason Nelson. He's been able to give you 10 points, 2.5 steals per contest, so has been a relatively solid defensive player, but without Barisau in the fold, it was a 40% three-point shooter a season ago. Team is only shooting about 30% from three-point range, and they don't necessarily have ideal rebounding. You've got Tubai Lowell, who's come over from the country of England. He's been able to give the team about 7 rebounds per game, but I do think that Seattle, with their overall versatility, going to be able to hold in there. It feels like everyone caters to Cam Tyson, who was the primary scorer for the season ago, averaging about 20 points per contest, down to about 15.5 points per game this season, but you've had good rebounding across the board. You got 5 separate guys that are able to give you at least 4 rebounds per game. Brandon Chartfield has been able to give you about 4 boards at 6'11". He last year was a relatively solid three-point shooter. You've got Kobe Williamson, 6'8" combo player that comes over from the country of Australia. He's been able to shoot threes. He's only had about a 27% clip throughout his career, but he averages right in the neighborhood of about, for his career, 4.7 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. Does a nice job down low. And then Alex Schumacher is able to be a double-figure scorer to help out Cam Tyson as well. VCU just not generating the steals that they did a season ago. And Seattle actually down with regards to their overall tempo. Last few seasons, this has been a top 100 team in terms of total possessions per game. Thus far this season, they've been more around 290th, but I do think that things crank up a little bit. I think VCU, even with the ailments, is better than a 29.7% three-point shooting team as well. So I do feel like this total is a little bit too low. I did set mine at a 144.5, also because I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be close enough to warrant some late game felling. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over, but with Seattle being able to get 5 or more, taking a look at the points that go along with that over. 617, 618 on the betting board. It is Southern Indiana. They are going to be on the road facing off against LaSalle. LaSalle is exploring a cover as between 14.5 and 15-point favorites, and totals between 143.5 and 144.5. Could only make LaSalle a 12-point favorite. Southern Indiana loses darn near everything from a season ago, but I'm just not willing to lay this big of a number with LaSalle. This is an Explorers team that they lose the Drame brothers from a season ago. Josh Nickelberry was the primary scorer for them, so that leaves it up to Jamari Breakus, who has been solid this far. 17 points, 4 boards, 4 assists season ago. He's able to shoot about 38% from the outside with right around 3 assists per contest, but you've had Jeremiah Hernandez be able to step up for Southern Indiana, a guy that began his career over at Kent State a season ago. He was averaging about 5 points per game, but did shoot about 40% from three-point range, so he's been able to elevate his game. You have Jordan Tillman, who was the primary scorer over at Florida A&M a season ago, making some contributions. Then you bring in someone like a Kyron Powell, who began his career over at Houston. He's been able to give you a little bit of something. They were hoping for Yuran Hassan to be able to help out as well. Gentleman from Israel who was part of that UConn national title team, but there's a reason why he was a walk-on. He has not been able to give them too much of anything, but not like LaSalle's necessarily doing a great job on glass themselves. They've got Deshaun Shepard, who's a combo player right around about 6'5", 6'6". Last season, logged 6 points, 4.5 rebounds, but did come on towards back half of the season. He's been able to give the team right around 5.5 rebounds per game, but I do think that Southern Indiana, even though they don't necessarily have a ton of size themselves, they're going to be able to hold up down low, and I do think that this is going to be a skoge more of an up-tempo game. Southern Indiana, since they joined the Division I level, they are certainly looking to push the tempo a little bit more. They've been off with their shooting as they have been held below 70 points in their first 3 games of the season, but we have noticed that LaSalle has been cranking things up just a little bit from a season ago because they do have mostly a guard-oriented roster as well. So I did set my total at 146. I think this is going to be a shooter-shoot sort of game. So going to be taking a look at the over, and with Southern Indiana, going to be taking the points, set them as a 12-point underdog, 619, 620. This is from the old Sanford Pentagon, as you've got Oregon State and Nebraska doing battle. Nebraska is a favorite of between 8.5 and 9 points. Your total is between 134 and 135. Set Nebraska as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. When it comes to Oregon State, you have Jordan Pope, who's able to do a nice job as a primary scorer. A season ago, was able to log double figures. Wasn't necessarily the world's most efficient scorer, but you know what? He was able to pop a few threes, was able to do a nice job of being able to hold it down for this team, but got a Nebraska bunch that they are going to be able to absolutely decimate down low. 6'10" rink mass. He's got all sorts of versatility, as over at Bradley a season ago, put in there about 13.5 points, 8.5 boards, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and he has been duplicating that with this Nebraska team as he's actually up to averaging a double-double here in the early portion of the season. You've got Kasai Shomanaga back in the fold as well. Not going to give you rebounds, not going to give you assists, but a good primary shooter in general. Bryce Williams comes over from Charlotte. He was a 40% three-point shooter at 6'7". Just all sorts of versatility for Nebraska, including the Josiah Alec down low. And for Oregon State, Tyler Bladue has actually been able to do a halfway decent job down low. He's up to averaging about 9 rebounds per game after he was a part-time starter for the team a season ago. And then the Georgia transfer in Christian Wright, he has been able to get things a little bit more right this season after last year. Just couldn't get out there on the floor too much, was dealing with injuries. He has looked much better this year with about 9.5 points per contest, but you just don't have a lot of options with this Oregon State team. You've got pretty much 4 guys averaging north of 6 points per contest. Other than what you're able to get out of Bladue, you've got one other guy that's able to give you north of 5 boards per contest. It's a team that doesn't necessarily shoot the three well. They don't necessarily play up tempo, and yet they're turning the ball over 14 times per game. Just a sloppy team in general. And Nebraska has slowed down their tempo in recent years, and they have given up 63 points or fewer in their first 4 games of the season. So I did set my total at 133. I think that Oregon State just not going to be able to hold up their end of the bargain with regards to this total. I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with this Nebraska team, want to lay up to 10.5 with them. 621, 622 on the betting board. It is Harvard and Boston College. This is a game that is presently off the board. I believe that this is because Harvard was actually in action on Friday. So this is a game that is presently off the board, but I did set Boston College as a 7-point favorite. I would be willing to lay 6.5 or less with them. When it comes to this Boston College team, I think that they've got the best player out there on the floor. They've got Quentin Post, who is a true 7-footer that is currently logging 19.5 points, 7.5 boards, and was able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range with all that size. They are going up against a Harvard team that had a tough task against UMass yesterday. I guess that they're getting themselves prepared for those back-to-backs in the Ivy League, and it was a lower-scoring game that they played yesterday as well against UMass. I do like what you're able to get in the backcourt out of Malik Mack. He's a true freshman that has come in and going into yesterday was averaging darn near 18.5 points per contest, doling out 4+ assists per contest, and then Justice Ogbokpar along with Chizam Okpara. These are 2 guys that down low, they're able to give you a little bit of rebounding. My biggest concern with Harvard, though, is depth, and when you're playing in a back-to-back, that can catch up with you. This is not necessarily the world's greatest backcourt for Boston College. You're looking at Jaden Zachary, Wacky Zachy, who 2 seasons ago shot well above 45% from 3. Seasons ago was cold with his 3-point shooting, but he's been able to do a better job of being able to dole out the ball this season. You've also been able to get a little bit more scoring out of Mason Madsen as well, who began his career over at Cincinnati a season ago. Only shot about 30% from three-point range. So, interesting circumstance here. I did set my total at a 135, so 134.5 or less. Looking at the over 135.5 or higher. Looking at the under both of these teams. Perennially not up-tempo teams, and with Boston College willing to lay up to 6.5 with them, 7.5 points or more. Going to be willing to take those points with Harvard. 623, 624 on the betting board. Cal Poly is going to be playing against Portland State. This is another game that is a part of a back-to-back. This is a multi-team event on the campus of Cal Baptist, so this is a game that is also presently off the board, but I do have my handicap as I set Cal Poly as an 8.5 point underdog. I'm willing to lay up to 8 with Portland State, and did make my total to where a 142 or less. I'm going to be willing to dive in on the over, and a 143 or higher. I'm going to be taking a look at the under. When it comes to this Cal Poly team, they are looking to play a little bit more up-tempo this year, and they do bring in Jared Hyder, who began his career at Fresno State as a freshman. He was able to dole out 3 assists per contest and saw some minutes at Cal. Didn't see a significant amount of minutes, but you know what? Seeing minutes at Cal, that's a big upgrade for this team out in the Big West that has been just not able to get anything going whatsoever. And for Cal Poly, they weren't able to get a lot going against St. Thomas yesterday, but St. Thomas is one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. They're certainly going to be looking at Quentin Jones, Cal Poly is, who was able to have himself a double-figure game yesterday, and Joel Armotraden. He comes in from the country of England. He's been able to get the team right around 5 rebounds per game, but not ideal size there, which that's to the benefit of Portland State. Portland State, if they do have an issue, it is down low. Have been able to get the Johnsons going, as actually you've got Isaiah Johnson, who's been able to give you right around 7 boards per contest. he's been able to do a nice job on that front. And then you do have KJ Allen, who he comes over from the Big 12, 12 points per contest. Overall, Portland State has only been able to shoot 30% from three, but even with them losing their main point guard from the season ago in Cameron Parker, they've been able to do a nice job of taking care of the ball, only about 9.3 turnovers per contest. This is a team that perennially has played a little bit more up-tempo. You've noticed them backing up just a touch this year, but you've got a guy in Bobby Harvey who's able to shoot about 38.5% from three, 7.5 points per contest a season ago after beginning his career over at IUPUI, and I do think that for Cal Poly, they're going to have a tough time matching up with a Portland State team that does have good versatility, and Cal Poly, once again, looking like a rough shooting team. So 142 or less, looking at the over, 143 or higher, taking a look at the under, willing to take 9 or more with Cal Poly, and willing to lay up to 8 with Portland State. 625, 626 on the betting board. It is Weber State, and they're playing against Yale. This is from Old Canada, as you've got Yale, a 4.5 point favorite on the opener, total of 139. A lot of books will probably not have this up until the AM because this is another one of these ordeals where both of these teams did play yesterday. That said, I did set Yale as a favorite of 3.5 points, so being able to get 4.5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take those points. And when it comes to this Weber State team, a little bit of a rough loss yesterday against Gardner-Webb, though I do think that Gardner-Webb is a solid team. And for Weber State, it's all about having their best player out there on the floor in Dylan Jones just completely take over. We saw him in that game against St. Mary's, have a double-double. Season ago, he was logging just under 20 points per contest. He was really able to be an impact player on both sides of the floor, and they're going up against a Yale team that has found quite a bit more offense than a season ago. Yale was actually a top 20 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago on the road, and they held Colgate to 50 points. Colgate is perennially a top 5 team in the country in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, so this is a team that's able to put the clamps down on you, but you've got John Polidikis along with August Mahoney, both being able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range. Mahoney went 4 of 4 from distance yesterday. With Polidikis, he went 2 of 4 from distance a day ago. Matt Noling has been able to be a solid double-figure scorer for this team as well. You've got Baz Mbeg, who's a relatively good facilitator, and this is a Yale team that legitimately can go right around about 9 or so deep. And then on the flip side for Weber State, they certainly are not going to be able to go 9 or so deep, but you do have a nice ancillary scorer to be able to help out Dylan Jones, and that'd be Steve Verplanken, who last season shot about 40% from three-point range, has been down a little bit this season, but his team has a bit more size to be able to support down low as well. As you've got Tyson Kohler, who a season ago he was a starter, but didn't necessarily offer a lot of rebounding, but did shoot about 36% from three-point range. He's a 6'7", a little bit of a combo player. Seems like he's hitting the glass a little bit more this season, and I think the big key for this team, 6'11" Alex 2. Can you get him to be able to elevate the 4 to 5 rebounds per game that he's pulling in? Because he could be a nice impact player, a little bit more of a true back to the basket guy. You've also got KJ Cunningham, who's able to give you a few assists. He's never really been a primary scorer, but did shoot about 35.5% from three a season ago, and when he puts up these shots, he actually is a relatively solid shooter as well. So I do think that Weber State is going to be able to hold in there. I think that this is going to be a unique little bit of a challenge for Yale. You've got a Weber State team that has been a little bit all over the place with regards to their results, as for Weber State, they have been held 62 points or fewer in 2 out of their 3 games, but I do think that both of these teams are going to be opening up their offenses, so I did set my total more around to 143. I do think that this is going to be a game that's going to be close enough for some late game fouling, and I do think that Weber State going to try to play a little bit more tempo in this game against a Yale team that they've shown that they can be a little bit rattled when they do get just pushed in a little bit more transition. So I do think that that's going to be the strategy for Weber State to be able to keep this one snug. I'm going to be willing to take 4 or more with Weber State, and at a 143 or less, going to be taking a look at the over. 627, 628 on the betting board. Cal Baptist is going to be playing against the St. Thomas. No numbers up on this game, as both of these teams did play yesterday, but that said, with St. Thomas, I set them as 5.5 point underdogs. Anything of 6 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points. 5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Cal Baptist. And when it does come to this total, 133 or less, looking at the over, 134 or higher to the under, was very befuddling that last season. We did see Cal Baptist play at one of the slower tempos in all of college basketball with the Armstrong brothers in the fold. They do lose those guys from a season ago, and now they're all of a sudden starting to play a little bit more up-tempo. So go figure there. But Dominique Daniels has been a guy that Cal Baptist has featured. He's been able to give the team 47 points in the first 2 games of the season, and it is going to be an issue for St. Thomas to face off with Hunter Goodrick, who began his career at South Dakota. He last season shot 46% from three-point range. This year, he's had 25 rebounds in the first 2 games of the season. But what I like about the St. Thomas team is that they themselves have some guys that you're able to rely upon down low. Brooks Allen along with Parker Jorklin, both of these guys have been able to give you 5+ rebounds per game the last 2 seasons. Jorklin has really become a good primary scorer. 15+ points per contest at 6'7" last year, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range. You're getting a little bit more out of Kendall Blue as well. He's been able to give you about 8 to 9 points per contest. Was a nice starter last season that was able to emerge as a 6'6", little bit of a combo player as well. And when it comes to this Cal Baptist team, the backcourt is in a little bit of transition. I think that they're going to be featuring a bit more Blondo Chiqueño, who comes over from New Hampshire, where 2 seasons ago he's able to shoot 40% from three-point range. Ivan Odriogo, he began his career over at Nebraska. He's someone that is 6'9", not going to give you any versatility, not really much of a scorer, but in 3 out of his 4 years at the college level has provided at least 5.9 rebounds per game, capable of being able to give you some blocks. So it's a very interesting ordeal. Cal Baptist, I think, plays a little bit faster this year than they did a season ago, but they don't have the facilitation that they did a year ago. So I do think that St. Thomas is going to be able to hold in this game. 6 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with the Tommies. 5 or less, one to lay it with Cal Baptist. And then 133 or less, looking at the over. 134 or higher, I'm going to be diving in on the under. 629, 630 on the betting board. It is Northern Colorado, and they're on the road facing off against New Mexico State. The Aggies are a favorite of between 6 and 6.5 points, totals between 148 and 149. I did set New Mexico State as a favorite of 7 points. Here at a 6 and 6.5, I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Now, New Mexico State, completely a makeshift team, as literally every single minute that they had a season ago is gone, and they've got a new coach in Jason Hooten, who darn tootin', he was able to do a solid job over at Sam Houston State a season ago. But you've also got a relatively new-look Northern Colorado team, as they do lose Dalton Connect from a season ago. He's currently tearing it up at Tennessee. Now, they do bring in St. Thomas, who was a flopper Rooney last season over at Loyola Chicago, but I mean, thus far, he's looked relatively solid for this Northern Colorado team. 13.5 points, 11.5 boards. Don't think that that's going to be long-lasting, but he's a 6'7", little bit of a gadget guy that's able to impact the game in a wide variety of ways. You've also got Riley Abercrombie. You might be missing Fitch, but he's been able to give the team 5 boards. He, throughout his career as a 6'9", little bit of a stretch player, has been a good three-point shooter each of the last 2 years, shooting at least 40% from the outside. You also get a little bit of production in the backcourt out of DeJour Reeves, who has come in from the non-Division I level, and it's looked very good early on, being able to provide about 14.5 points per contest. But for Northern Colorado, they're shooting about 29.5% from 3. Northern Colorado always does a good job of not turning the ball over, fewer than 10 turnovers per game, but they just don't have the shooting pop that they did a season ago. And for New Mexico State, it's a little bit of a disjointed unit as of right now, but they've got a lot of good scorers. Like Jalen Jackson Posey a season ago, and Stephen F. Austin was a north of a 40% three-point shooter. Jordan Rawls, when he was over at Western Kentucky a season ago, not a guy that's going to bomb it from the outside, but he's able to get guys involved with about 2.5 assists, 7.5 points per game. He's been a nice primary ball handler. And then you bring in Jaden Harris from the non-Division I level. He has been stroking it well from three-point range. New Mexico State certainly could use a little bit more down low. You don't have much other than Kazu Azugi, who comes over from Sam Houston State with his coach in Newton, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. But I do like the way that things are coming together. And Northern Colorado, they're really lacking a lot down low as well. I did set my total at 149. I do think that this is going to be an up-tempo game, and Northern Colorado over the last 2 seasons has been one of the more deplorable defenses in all of college basketball. So it's a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with New Mexico, one to lay up to 6.5 with New Mexico State. The Aggies, 631, 632 on the betting board. It is Nevada. They play us at Portland. Portland is an underdog of 13.5 points with your total 146.5 with Nevada. Can I set them as an 11.5 point favorite? Now, I am warming up more and more on this Nevada team. I have been highly impressed by what they've been able to do thus far this season, but I do think that this has gone a little bit too far, and I do think that for this Nevada team, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time matching up with Tyler Robertson. Tyler Robertson is just a do-it-all player that a season ago, he was pretty much the only guy that could stay healthy for a Portland team that had injury after injury. At 6'5", 6'6", he's able to give you about 5 assists, 15 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, while stroking it from three-point range. On top of that, they have brought in Tyler Harris to be able to help out this team as well. He's 6'8", true freshman, one of the best recruits that this program has ever landed. He's averaging 17.5 points and shooting over 50% from three. We should see a little bit of regression there for this Nevada team. Currently, they're only shooting 24.5% from three, and yet they completely just boat race Washington. They destroyed Pacific, winning 88-39 when they were up 40 points at the half, and this team is going to get better from three-point range. You got Jared Lucas currently shooting 21% from three-point range. Keenan Blackshear has made as many threes as myself, but Blackshear last year had like 15 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, at 6'5". He's able to do it all. Jared Lucas is able to dole out the ball, and Nevada does the little things well. Last year, they were a top 20 team in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis and free throw shooting percentage. This year, 7.7 turnovers per contest and shooting 79% at the free throw line. They're not allowing a lot of second chances as well, with getting about 7.5 boards per contest out of Nick Davidson. But I do think that this is a Portland team that's much better than what they showed a season ago. Now you've got back the full Chris Austin, who missed the entirety of the 2022-23 season after he was a starter a season ago. And you've got Vukasin Mazic, who 2 seasons ago over at Maine was one of their primary guys with about 9.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. Not going to be a primary scorer, but a very good glue guy in general. At 6'6", 6'7", provides good versatility. So this is a circumstance where I'm going to be willing to take these points with Portland, set them as an 11.5 point underdog. And in terms of this total, I did set it at a 149.5. Nevada, I do think that they're in for some positivity in terms of the 3-point shooting, and I do think that Portland going to be looking to play up and down much like they did a season ago as well. Now we go to 633, 634 on the betting board. This is over in the state of Connecticut at Mohegan Sun, as you got Mississippi State. They're playing against Washington State. Washington State is a 6.5 point underdog. Your total's anywhere between 134.5 and 135. And with Mississippi State, I did set them as a 7.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. Mississippi State currently dealing with Tolu Smith, their top scorer, being out of the fold, but with this team, they have found a way to be able to persevere because they brought in some really nice players via the junior college market. As you got Trey Fort, he was rated by many as a top 5 guy at the junior college level, and he's really helped this team out with their 3-point shooting. Last year, Mississippi State, out of 363 D1 teams, they were 363rd in terms of their 3-point shooting percentage. 13.5 points, shooting over 45% from 3. Josh Hubbard has come in as a true freshman. He has shot north of 40% from distance, but able to dole out the ball a little bit. And then you've gotten just really good production in general out of someone like a Cameron Matthews, who at 6'7", is able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. Shaquille Moore missed the first few games of the season, but now he's back in the fold. He was one of the few guys that could pop it from 3-point range. DJ Jeffries has been a nice designated rebounder for the team as well. And they go up against Washington State team that they lose pretty much 4 of their top 5 scorers from the season ago. Andrei Yagmovsky, the gentleman from North Macedonia, has really been able to step up after last season. He had moments of really good play, but felt like he would just fade away in general. Thus far this season, through 2 games, he's been able to supply 35 points, but do have my question marks if he's able to maintain consistency. I think the wild card here is Joseph Yasufu. When he was at Drake during the 2020-21 season, at 13 points per contest, shot it well from 3 for a team that was able to make the NCAA tournament. But with Washington State, lots of brand spanking new pieces. They bring in Isaac Jones, who is a primary scorer over at Idaho, but this is a big leap up in competition for him as well. So I do have my question marks on that front, and I do think that with this Mississippi State team being one of the best in all of college basketball, really being able to D you up, they were a top 10 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They take it to a Washington State team that is also a very slow and controlled tempo team as well. Semi-total 129.5, diving in on the under and willing to lay up to 7 with Mississippi State. 635, 636 on the betting board, also from Connecticut. Northwestern and Rhode Island do battle. Neutral court game where Northwestern's between a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite, and your total is between 136 and 136.5. Semi-total 134. I'm going to be diving in on the under. It certainly does take a year for most of these coaches to be able to find their footing at a new environment, and for Archie Miller, that was certainly the case for him. And the defense has looked relatively solid as well. 70 points or fewer surrendered in 2 out of their first 3 games, but this Northwestern team, they do a good job of just flat out taking you to the dentist. This team is not necessarily the world's greatest on the glass, but Brooks Barnheiser, I think he's going to be able to do a solid job down low. He's been able to give this team 10 rebounds per contest, as right now Zeke Montgomery is your top rebounder for Rhode Island. He's a 6'6", little bit of a combo player, comes in for Bradley, and I like his game. He's been able to give you 14 points per contest, rolling out 3.5 assists per game. A season ago, he shot north of 40% from three-point range, so some legitimate upside there, but you do have to wonder how this team is going to be able to find a way to put the ball in the basket against a Northwestern team that, in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, has had one of the best starts of any team in all of college basketball this season for Rhode Island. I'm not even kidding here. The guy by the name of Always Right is right now doling out the ball. He's been able to give out right around 4 assists per contest, and this is a legitimately good backcourt. They do bring in Jaden House, who was playing in the Big South a season ago. Not a great three-point shooter, but is able to drive the ball into the rim. He was able to have 17.5 points per contest a season ago. Lewis Coatright, he was over at Quinnipiac a season ago. He's able to give you a little bit of facilitation as well, but Northwestern is just a very wise team. They've got Boo Buie, who a season ago, he was just so good at being able to dish out the ball, and thus far this season, he's been able to log about 21 points per contest. He is turning the ball for 3 times per contest, a little bit uncharacteristic of him, but if you look at what this team was able to do a season ago, Northwestern was a top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per-possession basis. I think that they're going to be right back there this season, and I do think that with Northwestern being able to provide someone like Ty Berry, who's able to give you some nice, just a little bit of everything as a glue guy a season ago. He was able to give you about 8 or so points per contest. Never has really been a supreme three-point shooter, but he's able to log about 5 boards, a steal and a half per contest, bringing in Ryan Langford, who is solid over at Princeton, a part of that NCAA tournament run. I do think that this team is going to be able to get the job done, and I do like this team laying a smallish number. I do think that if we get to 8.5, it's went a little bit too far because this is being played in the state of Connecticut. That helps out Rhode Island just a little bit. I set my line at 8, mostly seeing 8.5, so at 8.5 would be willing to take the points with Rhode Island, but I think the Northwestern gets their defensive style, set my total 134, so diving under and taking 8.5 or more with Rhode Island. 637, 638 on the betting board. It is VMI, and they're going to be playing against Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona between 4.5 and 5.5 point favorites. Your total is anywhere between 150 and 152, and on this one, I did set VMI as a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Northern Arizona. Northern Arizona, for one, looks improved, and two, keep in mind that this is for the Arizona tip-off. This is out there in Glendale, Arizona, Northern Arizona, based out there in Flagstaff, so they have a nice little home court advantage. VMI, I don't necessarily think is the world's worst team. They certainly have been bad on defense over the last few seasons, but all in all, they do give you some relatively good effort. I think that they're not going to get completely plowed on the glass because you've got a Northern Arizona team that's been dealing with Carson Tout being out of the fold, so that should give to Chad Jackson, who for VMI has been able to log about 10.5 rebounds per game. He's been able to chip in there right around about 6-7 points per contest, a chance to be able to operate, but you do have on the flip side for Northern Arizona, Liam Lloyd, who's become Mr. Do-It-All for the Sponge. Right around 11 points, 7 boards. He's doling out north of 6 assists per contest. Not necessarily been the world's greatest three-point shooter, but we did see this Northern Arizona team a few days ago who has been migrating mediocrity when it comes to their scoring, be able to get it done on the road against Seattle, despite the fact that they went 4 of 23 from three-point range. I do expect Northern Arizona to pick it up a little bit from three-point range. Going into yesterday, they were shooting 21.5% from three-point range, and they had a pedestrian showing on Friday as well, so you can tell how badly they need some of their guys back out there, but I expect a little bit more moving forward out of Oakland Fort. He was able to get things going with 14 points against Fort Wayne. He was one of the big heroes and the big reasons why they were able to get to the Big Sky final a season ago. Meanwhile, for VMI, you're looking at Tyron Cook, who's really been able to cook things up. The freshman from the great state of Wisconsin has been able to give you about 12 points per contest for a VMI team that they always rely upon their three-point shooting. They're currently shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range and sub-60% at the free throw line, so they're going to need to balance that out a little bit, and they could use a little bit more rebounding out of DJ Nussbaum as well. Someone who a season ago was able to give the team right around 3.5, 4 boards per contest, and a relatively limited amount of minutes, was injured and did miss quite a bit of time, but at 6'9", he can be a little bit of a clogger down low, and then you have been able to get good north of 40% three-point shooting out of Devin Butler as well, but was held scoreless yesterday. So you got inconsistency with this VMI offense, a Northern Arizona team that has been cold as well. I think that once again, you're going to see some positive variance here, but with Northern Arizona, they have not broken 67 points all season long. It is a VMI team that has been having a little bit of a tough time putting the ball in the basket as well. Put up 81 against South Dakota, but I think that that's a little bit of a byproduct of the way that South Dakota plays. So I did set my total at 145.5, diving in on the under of Northern Arizona, willing to lay up to 7 with them. 639, 640 on the betting board. Fort Wayne is going to be playing against South Dakota, also out there in Arizona. South Dakota is a underdog of 2 to 3 points with a total of 157. Did set my total at 148. I'm going to be diving in on the under. They're playing in back-to-back days, so I do think that that's going to tire these teams out a little bit. And for Fort Wayne, I do feel like they should be closer to a 6-point favorite. You saw them knock off DePaul, which that's not necessarily a Herculean feat this season, but Rashid Bello, he has come over from UW Parkside where he was putting up like nearly 20 points per contest, and he has translated up to the Division I level very well, shooting darn near 40% from 3-point range, 19 points, a little bit over 4 boards, stoling out right around 3.8 assists per game. He has been absolutely tremendous. The big key for Fort Wayne, controlling Lahat Thione down low, who began his career over at Utah. Last season was a part-time starter over at Central Florida. Was always a little bit more of a rim protector, but all of a sudden has become this team's main man, being able to hull in their 9 rebounds, right around 18 points per contest. At 6'10", not looking to get versatile and pop a bunch of threes or anything like that, but with South Dakota, the way that the team operates, having Paul Bruns back from a season ago, has been able to give you about 8 points per contest, being able to get a double-figure amount of points out of Caleb Stewart, the transfer from Louisiana Tech, who over on Louisiana Tech last season was relatively solid with about 5.5 points per contest, just has never really been a great 3-point shooter. That's been boding very well for a South Dakota team that the biggest key for them is the turnovers. They've been turning the ball over just under 15 times per contest. Meanwhile, for Fort Wayne, they have been very efficient with the ball, less than 8 turnovers per contest. I think that that's going to be a big difference maker, along with Andre 3000 Roberts, Quentin Morton Robinson. These guys being able to give you some nice points in the backcourt. Morton Robinson coming off of 27 points a day ago, shooting well over 45% from 3-point range. As Fort Wayne's forte has always been shooting from the outside, they're going to have a little bit of tough time with Thione down low. You just don't have that size with Fort Wayne, but South Dakota leaves themselves oftentimes very vulnerable from the outside. Fort Wayne, with the way that they have been able to take care of the ball, and the defense has honestly looked a little bit better for them as well throughout the season, as they have now given up fewer than 75 points in 3 out of their first 4 games of the season. Actually, all 4 of their first 4 games of the season. I do think we're a little bit too lofty with the total. Set mine at a 148, diving in on the under, and willing to lay up to 5.5 with Fort Wayne. 641, 642 on the betting board. This is from St. Thomas of the Virgin Islands, San Jose State, and Norfolk State to battle. San Jose State, a favorite of between 4 and 4.5 points. Total on this game, finding it anywhere between 134.5 and 135. Did set my total at 136. San Jose State has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball under the tutelage of Tim Miles, but with having Robert Viola out of the fold, this team has been playing a little bit faster. They've been a little bit less than trustworthy on the glass, but they go up against a Norfolk State team that really doesn't have a lot of size themselves. You've had Jalen Darden, who has been able to give you about 8 rebounds per contest as a 6'5", just get your nose dirty, sort of undersized big man for this Norfolk State team as well. Jabari Thomas, who's come over from UNC Wilmington, has really been a difference maker. Going into yesterday, logging about 17 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and you do have quite a few guys that are able to light it up from 3-point range. Christian Ings, a pair of seasons ago, was shooting 40% from 3-point range. Alan Bentrand has been in college basketball for forever. This is team number 3 for him. Season ago over at Rider, only logged about 6.5 points per contest, but did shoot 40% from 3-point range for a Norfolk State team that the big key for them is cutting down on the 13.5 turnovers per contest. You've been able to get a little bit of rebounding as well out of Kuel Melding. Hopefully I said that correctly. The gentleman from Buffalo is really glued to the bench over the last 2 seasons, but you've got Tibet Gronera as well on the flip side for San Jose State. Good versatility at 6'8". He's able to log about 14 points per contest along with Trey Anderson, who's been able to give you more like 13 points per contest. Both of these guys with size entered into yesterday, combined to shoot about 45% from 3-point range. And San Jose State should see some positive shooting variance going into the day on Friday. They were only shooting about 29% from 3-point range against Abilene Christian. They didn't necessarily eat up too much, going into 25 from 3-point range. I think that they get these shots to drop, and I do think that Myron Amy Jr., who's been able to do a solid job in the backcourt, had 21 points, 5 assists yesterday, going to be able to take hold. I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 with San Jose State. Did set my total at 136. I think that this game is going to be close enough to warrant some late game fouls. So, going to be taking a look at San Jose State and the overhead. This is the last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we have the extra games. 643, 644. Florida Gulf Coast and Hampton do battle from the Virgin Islands. Florida Gulf Coast between a 9 to a 10-point favorite. Totals anywhere between 148 and 154. We've went too far with this total. I set mine at a 146, so I'm going to be diving in on the under, but I also think that Florida Gulf Coast, by far the better team in this one. I'm willing to lay up to 12 with them, and honestly, I'm probably being a little bit generous to Hampton at this point. Hampton coming off of just getting completely railroaded, 164 against Kent State. They played relatively closely against Norfolk State as well, but this is not looking like the world's greatest roster. You do have down low somebody like Carice Mullen. He has been able to give you about 9 boards, supplying about 18 points per game, so he's been able to do his part. You bring in from St. Francis of New York, Tedrick Wilcox, who's been a nice double-figure scorer last season, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, but Hampton is having this lack of success due to the fact that they just can't hold on to the ball. They've been turning it over north of 16 times per contest, and now they do have to go up against the Florida Gulf Coast team that they're not looking to get as physical, and they're not looking to grab as many steals as some of the other teams that they played, like Kent State, but they do have Zach Anderson down low, who's been able to give you about 6 boards, 13 points per contest. At 6'7", he's a very capable three-point shooter. On top of that, this team now has Isaiah Thompson back in the fold after he was dealing with some injuries to begin the season. He had 15 big points in that game against Missouri State. He was able to show that he's back to full force, and for this Florida Gulf Coast team, they do have quite a bit of good three-point shooting that going into the day yesterday, they're only shooting about 29.5% from three. I think that that's going to be elevated. Chase Johnson, he a season ago shot 37.5% from three with about 13 points per contest. You've also got Keyshawn Kellman, who's able to dominate things down low, comes in from Princeton. He's been able to give the team just under 5 rebounds per contest, and with Hampton, you just have a lack of bodies in general. Outside of your really main starting 5, you might be able to go 6 or so deep. You really don't have anyone that's able to log north of 7 points per contest for you. They're looking to Nesbitt Square to be able to help out this team, as you've had Jordan Nesbitt dealing with a little bit of injuries, so Amir Nesbitt has had to step up, and Josiah Lusain, who came over from Campbell, where a season ago he logged 9 points, about 2 assists per contest. He just has not been a good fit for the team as a 6'7", a little bit of a do-it-all player. So with Florida Gulf Coast, set them as a 12-point favorite, going to be one to lay the number. Florida Gulf Coast, a little bit more of a controlled team that's not necessarily looking to play super duper up-tempo. Meanwhile, for this Hampton bunch, this is a squad that has been able to break the 70-point plateau against 1 out of their 3 Division I opponents thus far, and that was Howard, one of the most up-tempo teams in all of college basketball. So taking the under and one to lay with Florida Gulf Coast. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. You've got Loyola, Maryland, and they're going to be playing against Sacred Heart. This is going to be from Chesapeake Arena, and it's currently Sacred Heart, the 3-point favorite, and total on this game is 155. I think we went too high with this total. I'm going to be diving in on the under. I did set my total at a 146.5, but do agree with Sacred Heart being the favorite. I set Sacred Heart as a 4.5-point favorite. I really do like the Sacred Heart team, and I think that they're going to be able to own the paint. You do have Golden Decay for Loyola, Maryland, who it feels like he's been there for like 37 years at this point. He, throughout his career, has been able to give you about 6 to 7 rebounds per game. Thus far this season, about 7 boards per contest, but the coming of age of Tanner Thomas has been really big for Sacred Heart. Last season was averaging about 7 points, 4.5 boards per contest, but now he's shooting north of 50% from 3, 6'6" combo player, 15.5 points, a little bit over 8 rebounds per game, and that's in support of Nico Galletti. And Galletti, he's a stat sheet sufferer as well, right around 6'6". Last season, shot more in the neighborhood, about 31% from 3, but 15.5 points, a block, a steal, 6.5 rebounds per game. He's picking up right where he left off a season ago. And then you've got a pair of guys that come in from the Metro Atlantic, Aiden Carpenter, Raheem Solomon. Both of these guys are combining for about 29 points per contest, and both are shooting 40+% from 3-point range. And Loyola, Maryland just doesn't have the firepower to be able to match up. They do have Deion Perry, who's been able to give you 4.5 assists, 13 points per contest. Problem with him is he does turn the ball over a little bit too much. Loyola, Maryland as a whole, they're turning the ball over 14 times per contest. That has costed them a little bit in past years. You've got the Elich brothers, which you've got one of them out of the fold, Milos Elich, thus far this season as a 6'10", little bit of a stretch player. He's been able to give you 8.5 points, 4 boards. That's going to be a little bit of hard guard for the Sacred Heart bunch, but other than Perry, you just don't have a lot in the backcourt for this Loyola Maryland team. Tyson Commander is someone that they're looking to for some scoring, but this is a Loyola Maryland team that is breath of a little bit of shooting in general. So this is a spot where I did set Sacred Heart as a 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4 with them as they do play this game from the great state of Maryland, and with this total set it at a 146.5. I do think that, especially with this being an 11 a.m. Eastern time tip, that you're going to see some tired legs out there. So going to be diving in on the the under, and I'm going to be diving in on Sacred Heart. 306-503, 306-504. It is Old Wagner on the road facing off against Seton Hall. Seton Hall between a 17.5 to an 18.5 point favorite. Between 129 and 131 is your total. Did set my total at a 133.5. I'm going to be taking a look at the over. Biggest reason why is that it does seem like Seton Hall just has a little bit more shooting in general. The last few seasons, Seton Hall has been a little bit hit or miss, but you've got Kadari Richmond, who's just a nice stat sheet stuffer. He's able to give you about 10 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. He doesn't necessarily master one thing, but he does shoot in the high 30s from three-point range, just affects away in a wide variety of ways, has a little bit of size, and that's able to help out someone like a Dre Davis, who has been throughout his career a high 30s three-point shooter as well. The question mark that you do have with Seton Hall, and it's a big reason why I'm going to be taking the points with Wagner, is down low. They bring in Jada Bediako, who's relatively solid over at Santa Clara, being able to give you about like 7 rebounds per game, but he's an up transfer, so is Elijah Hutchins Everett, so you're lacking a little bit of something in the front court, but you do have Dylan Adi Awusu, who comes over from St. John's while he was over at St. John's for his career. Shot in the neighborhood about 35% from three-point range, but if there is one thing that Wagner does a good job of, it is really being able to control the arc, being able to do a good job with their guards in tandem, as you've got Ramir Moore back from a season ago, originally began his career at St. Joe's. Not a primary scorer at about 8.5 points per contest, has ever been a great three-point shooter, but one of the better defenders that you're going to find out there in the NEC. You're able to couple that with someone like Rob Taylor, who he was a part-time starter 8 seasons ago, that's able to give you right around 4 boards at 6'7". He's not afraid to get his nose dirty. And then on top of that, you've been able to have some nice production down low out of Tajai Kelton. Kelton comes in from the non-Division I level where he was able to tear it up and is currently shooting north of 50% from three-point range. I think that Wagner just going to continue what they've always done, playing slow, grimy, but able to take care of the ball, turning it over just 9 times per contest. I do think that the fact that both of these teams are valuing possessions a little bit more, and Seton Hall, they themselves on defense have been able to generate a lot of steals, turning that defense into offense. That is going to lead to a little bit of an over, but I think that Wagner's going to be able to hold in there with Seton Hall's inability to necessarily be assertive on the glass. So I'm going to be taking a look at this total over, set my total 133.5, and with Wagner, was willing to take 11 points or more with them. 306-505, 306-506. George Washington, our nation's first president, plays host to New Hampshire. New Hampshire is an underdog between 8 and 9.5 points. Your total, that is anywhere between 154 to 154.5. I did set my total at 142.5. I'm going to be going in on the under. Got a New Hampshire team that a season ago was one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. It does look like they're going to be playing a bit more up-tempo this season, but with this New Hampshire team, you've got to expect them to try to really be valuing the ball and try to force a George Washington team that they themselves have played much better on defense recently. 60 points or fewer surrendered in 2 out of their first 3 games, and I nailed Hofstra to 60 points. That is not easy to do, to be taking on that style as well. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under. You've got a New Hampshire team that as well, they're coming off of allowing just 64 points against Brown as well. I'm very impressed there. You have Clarence Daniels, who has been tremendous. Last year averaged a double-double. He's picking up right where he left off, 23 points, 8 boards. The question mark is, what are you going to be able to get around him? And thus far, you've been able to get about 14 points out of Ahmad Robinson. Robinson comes in from the non-Division I level, and he's been able to give this team a nice scoring pop, as right now he's shooting about 40% from three-point range. Overall, New Hampshire shooting about 38% from 3. I think what comes up must come down, though. I think that we're going to see a little bit of regression on that front, and George Washington, they've got the best overall scorer in this game, and that would be James Bishop IV. Bishop IV, 18 points, 4.3 assists, currently shooting 40% from three-point range. I do expect that to regress, and overall, it is a George Washington team that is shooting in the neighborhood of right around 40% from three-point range, so I do think that that is going to be experiencing quite a bit of a fall-off as well. But what I do like as well is Maximus Edwards, who was last season able to give the team right around 10 points, 6 boards per contest. Currently he's shooting 55.5% from 3, which, again, should be seeing a little bit of a fall-off there. But I mean, he's someone that you expect him to be able to be relatively versatile at 6'5", 6'6", and we all talk about the Autry over there at Syracuse succeeding Jim Boeheim. Well, his son is actually on this team and is actually a halfway decent contributor, because typically the coach's son is either the best or the worst player on the team. But Trey Autry is a true freshman, 6.5 points per contest, Doesn't look like he's ever going to be like a supreme scorer or anything like that, but all in all, has been able to be a nice player for this George Washington rotation. It is a spot where I did set George Washington as a 10.5 point favorite. I think that you've got a little bit more depth in general than New Hampshire. I think that New Hampshire might be feeling themselves a little bit after that Brown win. So willing to lay up to 10 with George Washington, and I do think that both of these teams are going to value things on the defensive side of things. Going to be diving in on the under 7x12 at 142.5. 306-507, 306-508. Presbyterian is going to be playing against Northwestern State. This is from North Florida Arena. No numbers up on this game because both of these teams played yesterday, but I've got my handicap. I did set Northwestern State as a 5-point underdog and made my total a 143. So 142.5 or less, looking at the over 143.5 or higher to the under end, would be willing to lay up to 4.5 points with Presbyterian. Presbyterian has been a little bit lucky this year with some of the shot selection and the way that those have been able to fall, but have been very impressed by this Blue Hose team as they don't necessarily have ideal size down low, and when it comes to the game that we did see on Friday, they did get handled a little bit by Maine. I actually do think that Maine is quite a good team for this season, but that said, if you're able to get a little bit more out of Trevon Reddish-Roan, who's had a little bit of a slow start to the season, averaging only about 5 to 6 points per contest, I do think that you're staring at something with this team. On top of that, they do need to find a little bit more of a primary facilitator. Maybe they found that Marquise Barnett, who yesterday was able to dole out 6 assists per contest. He has been able to give the team north of 2 blocks, 2 steals. He has been doing it all as a 6'4", nice, versatile player for this team. And you take a look at this Northwestern State team, it is bare bones as they had to go to the junior college level to find their coach. They lose Corey Gibson and really their top 4 scorers from a season ago, and they were supposed to be having Jordan Addison coming in as one of the top junior college transfers in all of college basketball, with Addison being out of the fold. It is a little bit rough. You still do have Braylon Bush, who was a top 100 junior college transfer according to JUCOrecruiting.com. He's had a little bit of struggle out of the gates, but is able to give you a little bit of facilitation. At 5'8", is a relatively solid 3-point shooter, but at the same time, very much undersized for the Division I level. They did bring in from the SWAC Dwayne Posey as well, who gives a part-time starter over at Alabama State, 7.5 points, 5 boards at 6'7", is able to offer a little bit of versatility, but do have to have your question marks with this Northwestern team moving forward on the glass because they've only got one guy averaging more than 4 rebounds per game as well. That'd be Jamison Epps, who stands right around 6'7", and that's going to be of the benefit of Presbyterian. 4.5 or less, going to be willing to lay it with the Blue Hose. 5.5 or more, going to be willing to take it with Northwestern State, and then 142.5 or less, looking at the over. 143.5 or higher, going to be diving in on the under. 306-509, 306-510. USC upstate is on the road facing off against Minnesota. The state with the smallest strengths in the union. Minnesota between 11 to 12 point favorites, and your total between 144 and 146. Could I set my line at 8.5? I'm going to be willing to take the points with USC upstate. We've already seen them take down East Carolina. Granted, it was a little bit of a wounded East Carolina team, but I'm quite impressed by what I've been seeing out of the Big South thus far this season. And for Minnesota, must we remind people that they blew a 20-point lead in the final 12 minutes against Missouri. That was very much less than savory, to say the least, for this USC upstate team. They've got guys there who put the ball in the basket. Trey Barneau is really the primary of them. He's been able to log about 14 points per contest a season ago. Shot in the neighborhood about 32.5% from 3 with 4.5 boards, 3 assists, 11 points per contest. I like what he's able to do. Good, versatile player. Down low, the team is going to be handled as Amir Langlis is right now leading the team with about 5 boards per contest. And you've got on the flip side Dawson Garcia, who at 6'11", he's able to let it fly from 3. Last season just was injured, but when he was out there on the floor, it was relatively solid. He's been able to average north of 20 points per game. It's what he's able to get around him, as Elijah Hawkins led all of college basketball in terms of turnovers per game of any player at the Division I level. Shot 46.5% from 3 with 13 points and 6 assists while he was over at Howard a season ago, but those turnovers were very costly, to say the least. You bring in someone like a Mike Mitchell, who I like what he was able to bring to the table over at Pepperdine, but him being able to be a contributor on a Big Ten roster is a little bit questionable. Shot 44% from 3-point range, but is not necessarily someone that operates great with the ball in his hands. And for Minnesota, this team is going to be able to have a rebounding advantage down low, but the fact that USC upstate, in my opinion, not going to be completely decimated on the glass, should be able to keep them relatively snug in this one. USC upstate shooting 42% from 3-point range this season, and should be coming down a little bit, as they were about a 34.5% 3-point shooting team a season ago, and they did lose their top scorer in Jordan Gainey as well. But that said, I do think that this is a little bit too lofty of a number for a Minnesota team that that has proven to be not trustworthy, and I think is going to turn the ball over a little bit too much in general. Did set this line at 8.5, so going to be taking a look at the points. Set my total at a 144.5 as well, secured at 146. Also diving in on the under Minnesota. They were in the bottom 50 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. AC is going to go 3-0-6-5-11, 3-0-6-5-12. Eastern Illinois is going to be playing against Coppin State. This is from Milet Hall. This is a neutral court game, and this is one that is presently off the board. I believe that is because Eastern Illinois, they were in action yesterday, but that said, I've got my number set. I said Eastern Illinois is a 7-point favorite, and I made my total a 139. You're staring at two of the worst teams in all of college basketball. I wish I could put it any other way. Coppin State lost 76-48 yesterday against Miami of Ohio. That's a relatively unsavory loss, and for Coppin State, they just need to find someone to help out Justin Winston. Justin Winston is a 6'8" combo player that actually began his career as a starter over at St. Bonaventure. I think that he's got quite a bit of talent in general, but you just need anything, whether that be facilitation, whether that be rebounding, because Winston entered into the game yesterday with 3.3 rebounds per game, and that was leading the team. That's a big, giant issue, and it's not like Eastern Illinois is necessarily doing an amazing job of batting down the hatches on the glass or anything like that, but this is also a bunch that has Cooper Jacoby, who's 6'7", comes in from Toledo. He's been able to give the team right around 10.5 points, 7.5 boards per contest. I like what he's been able to bring to the table. You're able to couple that with Jermaine Hamlin, who began his career at Illinois, has never really found his footing at this stop at Eastern Illinois, but still, he's able to give you some size. He's going to be able to win that battle down low along Sincere Malone, who does lend a little bit of versatility as a starter last year at 6.5 points, 5 boards, not necessarily a great three-point shooter, but with Eastern Illinois, you do have someone in Dan Lewis who actually shot north of 50% from three-point range a season ago. I do like what he's able to bring to the table, so this is a spot where I do think that Eastern Illinois should be able to control this game, though I do think that Coppin State has been the victims of a little bit of bad shooting variance as well. They entered into yesterday shooting 22.5% from three-point range. Again, this is a Coppin State team that stinks. They don't stink quite that bad, so it is a spot where at 6.5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Eastern Illinois. 7.5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Coppin State, and with the total 138.5 or less, looking at the over 138.9.5 or higher to the under, as this is a game played in the great state of Ohio. 3-0-6-5-13, 3-0-6-5-14. Longwood is going to be playing against NC Central. NC Central is an underdog of between 9 and 9.5 points. 132.5 to 133.5 is your total, and I set Longwood as an 11.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number with NC Central. Typically, this team does a great job of being able to bring in some talent via the transfer portal, and they do have Jadarius Harris, who's been able to log for the team 15 points per contest, began his career over at UT Martin, and has been able to take off after a season ago. It was a little bit of an afterthought. Did shoot 59% from 3 a season ago, but he only attempted 22 threes, so was a relatively small sample size there, and they are going up against a Longwood team that has been one of the slower tempo teams in all of college basketball, but I do think that we went a little bit too low with this total, in the low to mid 130s, set my total more around to 143, so I'm going to be willing to take a look at the over. You've got Simon Zapala. He comes in from Utah State, a true 7-footer that was just glued to their bench a season ago, but he has been a big impact player here for Longwood with about 9 boards, 15 points per game. You just have nobody on this NC Central team that's going to be able to match up with them. You're able to couple that with Jonathan Massey, who was a very solid player at McNeese a season ago. He's currently logging 14 points, 7 boards. Season ago, shot about 30% from 3 as a 6'6", do-it-all sort of player. Not shooting north of 50% from 3, and I should see a little bit of a fall-off. And much like I was talking about a minute ago with Coppin State being the victims of bad shooting variance, the team is shooting 23% from three-point range. Is this team going to be amazing from three-point range? No, you've got a primary point guard in Waylon Napper that has never been a good three-point shooter, but is able to dole out the ball. But I do think that this team is certainly going to be better than their 23.5% three-point shooting that they've got right now. Meanwhile, you've got an NC Central team that typically they're a very good team from the outside. They're shooting about 33% from three-point range because they are dealing with a lot of moving pieces. Pooh King, who he comes in from the non-Division I level. He's been one of your primary scorers, being able to supply about 14.5 points per contest. You've got Emmanuel Izabuner, who was actually in the Big South a season ago at High Point. He's been able to give the team a few rebounds, but it does feel like a lot of misfit parts trying to work together for the NC Central team, and I do think that Longwood going to be able to win from within, and I do think that Longwood sees a increase in their three-point shooting. So going to be taking a look at the over, set my total 143.5, and with Longwood willing to lay up to 11 points with them. 306-515, 306-516. You've got Binghamton, and they're going to be playing us to Marist. Marist is an underdog between 1.5 and 2 points, and your total is there between 131 and 133. I set Binghamton as a 3-point favorite, so getting them between 1.5 and 2, I am going to be willing to lay the number. I know that I've got a stan on my Twitter account that absolutely loves Binghamton, so we are going to be riding with Binghamton in this one. And with Binghamton, I think the biggest thing for them is that they face off against a Marist team that typically is really good with their 2-point shooting defense, but typically they can be completely destroyed from the 3-point arc. And I do think that Samir Torrance is the big X factor in this game. Began his career at Syracuse, has always been a relatively solid 3-point shooter. Has shot at least 33.3% from 3 in 3 out of his 4 seasons. And I mean, thus far this year, shooting 44.5% from distance, we should see a little bit of a fall off, but has reached double figures in every one of these games. On top of that, for Marist, you just don't have the same rebounding that you had a season ago with Patrick Gardner. They've been able to get right around 6 boards per contest out of a guy that I do like in Jaden Doherty. Doherty was glued to the bench a season ago, was a little bit more of a super reserve for them, and you do have in the backcourt for Marist Isaiah Brickner. Brickner, he's going to be looked to as their main point guard, as a season ago was able to give the team 7.5 points, 2.5 assists per contest, but you just haven't gotten that 3-point shooting that you were hoping for out of Cam Ferris. He's only played in 1 out of the team's 2 games. When he was at Robert Morris, was a 40% 3-point shooter. That has seen a big fall off. And then Max Allen at 6'9", to be able to give the team 12.5 points per game. Not really doing a lot on the glass, though. And with Binghamton, even though they don't necessarily have ideal size, I do think that they have just enough to be able to do a solid job down low with Tavion White. He's 6'8". He was a season ago a little bit more of a reserve for this team, with having a Quovo being out of the fold. He's really been able to step up, and then you've got a 3-headed backcourt that I do think is going to be able to make some nice contributions. And Dan Petcash, along with Armand Harid, Timo Chenery, these 3 guys, they've been able to combine for thus far this season about 26.5 points per contest. They're all able to rebound mildly well. And Chenery, who was over at Quinnipiac the last few seasons, I think that he can elevate the team with the fact that he is able to give you quite a bit on the defensive side of things as well. So with Binghamton, I did set them as a 3-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay the very small number. And when it comes to this total, I set mine at a 137. Both of these teams are relatively slow, but I do think that because Marist can get carved up from the outside, I do think that this is going to be a game close enough for late game felling. We can get this one over. So going to be taking a look at the over, and Binghamton laying this ball number 306-517, 306-518. Western Carolina, they are going to be playing us to McNeese. McNeese is an underdog between 4 and 5 points, and your total between 146 and 147.5. McNeese looked really good in their opening night win against VCU. Ever since then, they haven't really slipped up, but the biggest reason why they really haven't slipped up is because they've been playing a lot of non-Division I competition. Meanwhile, Western Carolina, it's not like they've necessarily played a murderer's row themselves, but they were able to get that nice win over Notre Dame as well, and I feel just a little bit more bullish about Vontavious Woolbright in this matchup. So I did set Western Carolina as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the 4 with Woolbright. I mentioned him, and he has been one of the most versatile players in all of college basketball. 20.5 points, a little bit over 10 boards, 5 assists, 6'6", do-it-all sort of player. Didn't shoot it well from 3-point range a season ago. That looks to be a little bit improved. And they're going up against a McNeese State team that they actually have a lot of talent. One of their top scorers from a season ago, Christian Schulmate, he was able to average just below a double-double a season ago. He is back to the fold, and he has looked very solid to start out the year, averaging about 10 rebounds per game in the first 4 games. Shahada Wells, I remember him from his time over at UT Arlington along with TCU, and actually had some nice moments at TCU a season ago as well. He's become their primary scorer with just under 14 points per contest. You've been able to have Ontavion Cullum, who is one of the best scorers over at Meep Meep, the Roadrunners of Cal State Bakersfield, DJ Richards. You go down the list, and you've got yourself a lot of guys that are able to put the ball in the basket for McNeese, shooting 41.5% from 3-point range. I do think that this is a lot of a byproduct of the competition that they played. Now, the good news is that builds a little bit of chemistry in general. The bad news is they're not used to going up against teams like a Western Carolina, that they do have a little bit more size than the teams that they were playing against. Someone like a 6'8" Bernard Pilati, I think, is going to be providing a little bit of a matchup nightmare. 9 points, 5.5 boards per contest, like what he's able to provide for the team. Western Carolina, they're shooting about 36.5% from 3 and just 8.3 turnovers per contest. They have been very efficient with the ball. This is a McNeese team that is currently averaging 15 steals per game, but again, 3 out of their 4 games came against non-Division I competition. Meanwhile, for Western Carolina, they've done a great job being able to supply defense, 65 points or fewer surrendered in each of their first 3 games. So it's a good old situation of something's got to give, because both of these teams are playing some solid defense, but both of these teams want to run as well. So I did set my total at a 145. Going to be taking a look at the under. I do think that the defense wins out just a little bit here. I'm with Western Carolina. One to lay up to 4.5 with them. 306-519, 306-520. Loyola Chicago is going to be playing us in New Orleans. New Orleans is a 14.5 to a 15.5 point underdog. Your total on this game between 151.5 and 153, with Loyola Chicago set them at 16.5 point favorites. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with New Orleans. This bunch just does not play any defense whatsoever. They have been a bottom-feeding team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and if you date it back to when their games were finally being listed on the betting board towards the beginning of the 2018-19 season, they've really got the top over rate in all of college basketball. You've got a New Orleans bunch that certainly is able to let it fly from three-point range. Jordan Johnson a season ago shot darn near 49% from three-point range as far this season. He's picking up right where he left off with 19.5 points per game, but that was against some non-D1 competition, so a little bit questionable there. And then when it comes to the flip side and what you're going to be able to get out of this Loyola Chicago team, they do look a little bit more well put together. The biggest key for them is that they need to stop turning the ball over so much. That was a big reason why they did not have a shot against Florida Atlantic. It's a big reason why in non-conference play a season ago, they were just absolutely awful. They've been able to get 14.5 points per contest on Desmond Watson, who comes in from Davidson. He's currently shooting 50% from three-point range. We should expect a bit of a fall-off, but you really don't have a lot of primary rebounding for Loyola Chicago. That's going to hurt them moving forward, but you just don't have any size whatsoever with this New Orleans team to be able to counter that with. You've been able to get about 4 boards per contest out of Omarion Henry. Henry's a 6'7" big man that season ago for New Orleans was able to give you about 3.5 rebounds per game, but really outside of what you were able to get a season ago from the likes of a Simeon Kirkland, you didn't have much of anything down low, and Kirkland, he's not out of the fold for the team, and they're really relying upon James Glisson III, the transfer from Mercer, to be able to elevate this team in the post after a season ago. He had a down year after 2 years ago when he wasn't injured, because last year dealt with some ailments, had 10.5 points, 5 boards per contest, but it doesn't feel like he's really fitting with this system. New Orleans is currently shooting 26.5% from three-point range, turning the ball over 13 times per game, so they've been sloppy with it as well. And for Loyola Chicago, you tell that under the tutelage of the current regime with Valentine and company, they are looking to play a little bit faster. So I did set my total at a 150.5. I think we've gone a little bit too far here, because I just think that New Orleans, with their inefficiency, not going to be able to help out too much with this total. So going to be taking a look at the under of the Loyola Chicago. One to lay up to 16 points with them. 306-521, 306-522. Colgate is going to be playing against Gardner-Webb. This is from the country of Canada. Colgate on the opener, a 4-point favorite, and your total on this game, it is 147.5. I had to set my total at 139. For one, you've got both of these teams playing on back-to-back days, and for two, we're seeing Colgate coming off of a 50-point clunker of a performance. Now, with this Colgate bunch, they are going to put up more than 50 points in this game. They were just unseasonably cold from three-point range a day ago against Yale, a Yale team that's one of the best teams in all the country with regards to their defense, but I do think that this is too high of a total, especially because Colgate is not necessarily a team that is going to be looking to push tempo. Now, I did set Colgate as a 5-point favorite personally, so I'm going to be willing to lay this opener, because I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job down low with having Keegan Records being able to log a little bit over 14 points. He entered into yesterday with 9.5 rebounds per game. You've also got a ancillary piece down low in Jeff Woodward, who stands right around 6'11". He's able to give you 5+ rebounds per game when he's given the proper minutes. And Braden Smith, I think, is going to be the best player out there on the floor. He is season ago shot 36% from 3, 11.5 points, 4.5 assists per game. Colgate always features one guy. A few seasons ago, that was Nelly Cummings. Last season, you tell that was Tucker Richardson. This year, it feels like the torch is being passed to Mr. Smith. But for Colgate, this team has also been turning the ball over a lot. You'll find that a lot with teams that bomb it from three-point range. This is a Gardner-Webb team that they've been able to do a relatively solid job with their defense, generating about 6 steals per game. They themselves have been rough in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. Entered into this multi-team event shooting less than 30% from three-point range. I think that should go up just a little bit. DQ Nicholas, someone that comes in from Southeast Missouri State, he was a double-figure scorer over there, and they've gotten some good contributions thus far out of Caleb Robinson, averaging about 14 points per contest. He, a season ago, was a little bit more of an afterthought on the bench, as he averaged about 8.5 points per contest as a sixth man for Gardner-Webb, but for Gardner-Webb, this has really never been an amazing shooting team. Last year shot 33.5% from three and a ghastly 63.5% at the free throw line. So I do think that Colgate going to be able to take control of this game. I did set Colgate as a result as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this opener of 4. And when it comes to this total, Gardner-Webb, very good on defense, slow and controlled team. They leave something to be desired on offense. So going to be taking a look at the under as well. 306-523, 306-524. Maryland Eastern Shore is going to be playing us to Penn. The Quakers of Penn between 10.5 and 11.5 point favorites. And your total, that is between a 140 and 141.5. I did set Penn as an 8.5 point favorite. Being able to get double figures, I'm going to be taking a look at the Shore. Maryland Eastern Shore, a new look team from a season ago when they were generating so many turnovers, when they were really able to click with their backcourt. They lose much of that from a season ago, along with their top rebounder in Nathaniel Pollard, but Troy Hupestad, he has been able to step up down low. He, a season ago, was really their reserve forward. Now been able to log about 5.5 boards, 9.5 points per game, and they're really having to trust quite a bit into Monty Claxton to be able to dish out the ball. Comes in from the non-Division I level, and he's very much a pass first guy. So only been able to give you about 4.5 points per contest, but is able to give you 4 assists per game, and he's going to be matched up with Clark Slazert, who he, over at Penn a season ago, was really the Robin to the Batman that was Jordan Dingle season ago. Shot in the mid-30s from three-point range with 13.5 points per game. He's really stepped up as a man for the team with a little bit over 3 assists, 15 points per game with Penn. Sometimes they get a little bit turnover happy. 15 turnovers per game is a bit unsightly, but they're shooting 37% from three-point range. They've been able to get good contributions out of Eddie Holm III, who was limited to just 15 games a season ago. Had some good moments a season ago, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but just couldn't stay out there on the floor. And then you also have Nick Spinoza, a 6'9" combo player that's been able to give the team 6 boards. He's able to dole out the ball as well. Penn is a much deeper team right now than Maryland Eastern Shore. I feel like Maryland Eastern Shore is trying to figure out what they've got a little bit, but Maryland Eastern Shore still doing a relatively solid job of being able to generate turnovers. And I do think that Chase Davis is going to be able to keep them lively in this game. A part-time starter from the season ago that has been able to log about 12.5 points per contest with the Shore. They have been struggling a little bit with their three-point shooting, but I do think that with their overall style and the way that Penn has been turning the ball over, this is a little bit too lofty of a number for them to be laying on the road. I set my line at 8.5, so I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Maryland Eastern Shore. They are looking to make games a little bit more defense-oriented. They're looking to generate steals because they have a little bit of a lack of rebounding as well. So set my total 138.5, diving under, and going to be willing to take the points with the Shore. 306-525, 306-526. North Florida plays host to Maine. Maine hopes to not get Maine as 1-point favorites. And your total on this game, it is 147.5. I set Maine as a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take Maine. Laying the point with Maine, they do a really good job of being able to rip the ball away. Kellen Tynes led all of college basketball last season in terms of steals on a per-game basis with right around 3.3. They're going up against a bunch of North Florida that is out there on their home floor, but they are in game number 3 in 3 games themselves, so both of these teams are a little bit fatigued, and North Florida plays at a much more up-tempo pace rather than Maine with this North Florida team as well. They don't necessarily have what it takes to be able to exploit the main weakness of Maine, which is that they don't necessarily have a ton of size down low. You got Dorian James, who has been able to log for the team right around about 7 or so rebounds per game a season ago. Was able to give the team more like 6 points, 5 boards, but for North Florida, they're really going to need to have the Bucknell transfer, Jake Vanderheiden, be able to step up, as he's been able to give the team thus far this season a little bit over 10 points per game, but he entered into yesterday shooting right around 52% from three-point range. Going to see some inevitable regression there, and you just haven't gotten a lot out of the guys like Nate Lateris, Oscar Berry, who comes over from Fairleigh Dickinson. These 2 guys need to step up because with Maine, they do have quite a bit of depth in their backcourt. You've got Keon Burns, who's 6'5". He's able to give you about 4.5 boards, 5.5 points per contest. You've had AJ Lopez be able to shoot in the neighborhood about 40% from three-point range. He has been a very nice addition coming over from New Hampshire, where he 2 seasons ago was a little bit of a combo player as well. And then you've got down low Peter Filpovsky along with Kristen Firebergs, who's been able to give you right around about 10 rebounds per game. So I do think that this bunch is going to be able to hold in there, and I do think that with Maine, because they are able to force those turnovers, they get the job done. I set Maine as a 2-point favorite, going to be willing to take them, and I do think that with this being game number 3 in 3 days, the legs are going to tire out, and I do think that Maine gets a little bit more of their slow tempo. So looking at the under, and willing to take Maine, willing to lay up to 1.5. 306-527, 306-528. Pacific is going to be playing with Lamar. Lamar is a 9.5 to a 10-point underdog, and your total, that is between 148.5 and 150 with Lamar. I did set them as underdogs of 7.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Pacific has been all over the place. They knock off Cal on the road, and then they're down 40 at the half against Nevada. So, will the real Pacific please stand up? But for Pacific, they're going to have a little bit of a tough time against a Lamar team that legitimately, I think, has really improved from a season ago. 2 years ago, this team did not win a single WAC conference game. They moved back to the Southland, but now they've got some nice rebounding, as you've got Adam Hamilton, who was injured for much of the season last year. He's able to give you about 11 points, 8 boards per contest. You've also got Valentin Kott, who was limited to 7 games season ago. He's able to chip in there right around 4 to 5 boards per contest. Lamar, they're currently shooting 36.5% for 3, 83% of the free throw line. We should see a little bit of a fall off from that, but I like what Jakavion Buckley has been able to give you in the backcourt as well. A highly touted junior college transfer a few seasons ago, then last year generated a little bit over a steal, 2.5 assists, about 8 points per contest. You've been able to get really good shooting out of BB Knight thus far this season, shooting 40% from distance, 90% the free throw line with 14 points per contest. And for Pacific, the team just really doesn't have a lot down low. I think that Lamar wins the battle because you've got Greg Outlaws right now giving you about 4.5 rebounds per game. That's about it. Now, with Pacific, they do have more sustainable shooting, even though they come into this game the worst shooting team as a whole, shooting about 63.5%. The charity stripe, 20.5% from 3. That should be going northward. Judson Martindale, a season ago, coming in from Holy Cross, shot 40% from 3-point range. You've got someone in Donovan Williams, who's been a career about low to mid-30s three-point shooter. He's able to give you 12.5 points per game. And then you've got a nice facilitator in Tyler Beard, who I like what he brings to the table. Shot 43% from the outside with 9 points, about 3 assists per contest a season ago. So I do think that for Pacific, they're going to be able to stabilize in the backcourt, but I do think that Lamar wins this battle down low. Lamar, a little bit suspect on defense, to say the least, against Division I foes. They've given up 78 plus in both of those games. Meanwhile, for Pacific, talking about a team that has been all over the boulevard, they have given up 64, 79, and 88 points. So this is going to be a game of fascination, to say the least, and I do think that Lamar cools off with their shooting, and I do think that Pacific going to be a little bit more of a mid-tempo team this season. Semi-total 147.5, diving in on the under, and with Lamar, we'll take 8 plus with them. 306.529, 306.530. Winthrop plays those to IUPUI. Old Huey Peewees, an 11.5 point underdog. Total on this game is 146.5. Set Winthrop as a 17-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. IUPUI got drilled yesterday by Elon, and with this IUPUI bunch, you don't have a lot of offense with this team. You don't have a lot of defense with them. The good news is you do bring in Bryce Monroe. He began his career at Sam Houston along with San Diego, so he gives you a little bit more in the backcourt, but for this IUPUI team, they entered in yesterday shooting 17.8% from 3-point range, and they aren't going to shoot sub 25% from 3 all season long, but other than Vincent Brady, you really don't have guys that you're able to rely upon from the outside. Jalen Counter a season ago did give the team 14.5 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, but he shot below 30% from 3-point range. John Igbuda is able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, but he's going to lose the battle against all the sides that you've got with someone like a Kelton Telford, who was able to register about 8 plus rebounds per game. The team brings in KJ Doucette, who was very good at Fort Valley a few seasons ago as well. He's a bona fide 6'7" gentleman that's able to give you some nice rebounding. And then on top of that, you bring in Alex Timmerman for Bucknell, who was a nice 6 plus rebound per game guy. Kason Harrison shot north of 40% from 3-point range a season ago. You've got Sincere McMahon, who he followed Mr. Mark Prosser over to Winthrop a season ago. He was able to log 13.5 points, shot 37.5% from 3 in IUPUI. They're just not guarding a soul from the outside as well. In that Elon game a day ago, they allowed Elon to go 14 of 28 from 3, and Elon sucks from 3. So this is really not a great IUPUI team, to say the least. And I do think that IUPUI going up against a Winthrop team that isn't necessarily up-tempo, and I mean, they're coming off of playing in back-to-back days as well. They're just going to be giving up the points. I think that a Winthrop team that had a little bit of a tough time with their rebounding to begin the season, they're going to be able to find their bearings, and I do think that for IUPUI, they're just completely outgunned in this one. I'm willing to lay up to 16.5 with Winthrop. Semi-total 147. It's also looking at the over. 306.531, 306.532. Lipscomb plays us at Alabama A&M. A&M is a underdog between 12 to 13 points, and your total between 146 and 147. And with Lipscomb, I set them as an 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alabama A&M. A&M, they are in a little bit of transition. They do lose guys like Messiah Jones and company from the backcourt from a season ago, but you do have a Lipscomb team that has been without their main scorer from a season ago, Jacob Ogniesevich, who he was really able to do a nice job of being able to space out the floor, was able to give you 15-plus points per contest. I have not heard anything on an injury or anything like that. He just hasn't been out there, and I just have to assume that he's out until further notice. So a little bit of an interesting ordeal there. You have been able to get some okay shooting, though, out of Will Pruitt. Will Pruitt had a rough first few games to start the season. That's why he's only giving you 5 points per contest, but I do think that he's going to be able to turn it around. He, without Ogniesevich in the fold, has been doing a little bit more facilitating a season ago at about 10 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, shot north of 40% from 3. Even though he's had some early season struggles, he'll be able to turn it around. And then A.J. McGinnis, the transfer from Cincinnati, has really been your primary scorer with about 17 points per contest. You're bringing Owen McCormick from Presbyterian to be able to give you a little bit of rebounding, but for this Alabama A&M team, even though they do lose quite a bit from last year, they do bring back one of their double-figure scorers in Dallin Smith. He's able to give you 15 points per contest, and a season ago, shot about 35.5% from three-point range. I also like the fact that they brought in Omari Peak, who he was a little bit of a reserve in season number 1 with this team, but he's able to give you about 6 points. He's a 6'6" do-it-all player that has been traveling around a few different HBCUs and has been productive at every single stop. The big thing for this Alabama A&M team is that they lose their 7-footer from a season ago in Olisa Blaze Okanobi. He was a 7-footer that was able to do a nice job jamming things up down low, so they're going to be looking a lot more to William Tavares, who's 6'10", a little bit raw, but I do think that he's going to be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass in concert with E.J. Williams. Williams spent so much time at Alabama A&M, has been a starter for pretty much all 4 of his seasons. He's never been a primary scorer, but has always been a good glue guy on defense, has given you typically about 4 or so rebounds per game. He's going to need to elevate a little bit this year, but with Lipscomb missing on Ogniesevich, I think that keeps Alabama A&M in the game. So I did set my line at 11. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Alabama A&M. A&M is up-tempo. They've been one of the least efficient offenses in all of college basketball the last few seasons, and with Lipscomb, I do think that they take a bit of a setback without Ogniesevich as well. So good to be diving in on the under and willing to take the points with A&M. 3-6-5-33, 3-6-5-34. Bryant is on the road facing off against Florida Atlantic. FAU, pretty sizable favorites here of 22 to 22.5 points. Total on this game is between 149.5 and 150.5. Did set my number at a 150. Between a 149.5 and a 150.5, I would rather take the under. Phil Martelli Jr. is now the coach of this team after the unfortunate Jared Grosso sort of situation that was going on. That is a conversation for a different podcast on a different day. But as far as the X's and O's that we've got with Phil Martelli Jr., he's really been playing a little bit more of a slow system with this Bryant team, and we've just seen it in all of their results that you've been seeing a lot of games going under. They go up against the Florida Atlantic team that was in the top 30 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis a season ago. So I would rather have the under rather than the over. And with Florida Atlantic, I did set them as just 18-point favorites. Vladislav Goldin is going to be able to hold things down low for Florida Atlantic. He's 7'1", logging 19 points, 7.5 boards. Really had a nice night number 1 showing against Loyola Chicago. And then you've got on top of that a backcourt that just is so well-rounded with FAU. You've got someone like a Nick Boyd who's able to do a nice job, giving you about 10 points per contest. Solid shooter, not necessarily amazing, but with Elijah Martin dealing with a little bit of an injury to begin the season, he's been able to step up. Martin looked a little bit more like himself in that game against Eastern Michigan. Played 20 minutes, 8 points, 3 steals. Do like to see that, and we've got pretty much a 9 to 10 man rotation with FIU that's able to play in concert. But with this Bryant team, you do have Earl Timberlake bringing Sexy back. He has been tremendous at just being that stat sheet suffer. 10.5 points, 10.5 boards, 4.8 assists per contest. Season ago, he was really good at being able to give the team right around 8.5 boards as a 6'6" do-it-all sort of player. You got Sharif Gross-Bullock, who's your main scorer that's currently shooting a little bit over 40% from 3, and the St. John's transfer, Rafael Pinzone. He has really been able to step up, shooting north of 45% from 3-point range, and I do think that Martelli Jr. going to be able to get more of these reserves, like a Doug Eater, like a Miles Lattimore in where Bryant, under Jared Grosso, they were playing more of a 6 to 7 man rotation, which I don't know why, because they would always bring in like a billion transfers. They had a lot of talent that would just be wasting away on the bench, so I'm not sure what was happening there, and I do think that Phil Martelli going to be able to upgrade this team. So I did set Florida Atlantic as an 18-point favorite, going to be able to take the points, and with this total between 149.5 and 150.5, I set mine at a 150. I would rather have the 150.5 under. 306, 535, 306, 536. Fairfield is going to be playing against Queens NC. Queens NC is a favorite of 1.5 points. Your total on this game is 155.5. I fully recognize that Queens NC is quite a bit of an up-tempo team, and with Fairfield canning Jay Young a few weeks before the start of the season, they're looking to play a bit more up-tempo. This is just too extreme. I set my total at a 145.5. I am going to be willing to take a look at the under. Now with Queens, I do think that they are going to be able to dominate this game, and this is one of those old neutral court games. This is a part of the Market Street Challenge. This is out there in Philadelphia, so a little bit closer to Fairfield than Queens, but pretty much a true neutral court for both of these teams. But for Fairfield, right now they're looking to Bryson Gudine to really just be able to manufacture points. He's been able to give the team 19 points, 5 boards per contest, and entered into yesterday shooting 46% from three-point range. That's been a little bit of a marvel for this Fairfield team, but for Fairfield, I feel like their numbers were a little bit artificially inflated by the first few games of the season. They played against Mount St. Mary of New York to be able to put up 92 points, and then against Drexel yesterday, they scored 47. Granted, a very good Drexel defense, but they got completely lambasted there. You really don't have any sides for this Fairfield team. Right now, they're still without Alexis Yetna as well, so they're just trying to mix and match, find out what they've got. Meanwhile, for Queens, you've got AJ McKee back from season ago, who's a really nice primary scorer for this bunch. Shot 39% from 3, 15.5 points per contest. He's picking up right where he left off. BJ McLaurin, he's able to do a nice job of spacing the floor as well. Last year shot about 39% from 3, 38.5% with 12 points per contest. This season they are still without their primary rebounder from a season ago, and Gavin Rains, as he's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, but on all, the team has been able to do a nice job of being able to hold it down. They're able to rebound by committee, with even someone like a Dayton Albury being able to give you about 6 boards per contest. So I do think the Queens takes it to a Fairfield team that is clearly missing Supreme Cook, and with Queens, they've got a supreme amount of scores. So did set Queens as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the very small number with them. Set my total at 145. I think that Fairfield, a team that's traditionally been very, very slow, gets a little bit back to their roots, so going to be diving in on the under and looking at Queens laying the number. 306, 537, 306, 538. Rutgers is playing against Howard. Howard finds themselves as underdogs of 13.5 points, with your total between 143 and 144. Did set my total at a 143.5, mostly seeing 143 out there, and I personally would rather have the 143 over rather than the 144 under, just because with Howard, they over the last few seasons have been playing very much at a breakneck pace, and you can tell that this Rutgers team is still very solid on defense. They're not quite the same defense that they've been the last few seasons, and you're not going to be when you lose Caleb McConnell, when you lose Cam Spencer, guys like that. They are in a little bit of transition on that front, but I still was willing to set Rutgers as a 15.5 point favorite, so I'm willing to lay up to 15 with them. Rutgers has Andre Hyatt, who's been able to do a nice job supplying 13 points, 6'6", 6'7"-ish, has been able to shoot it well from three-point range. Rutgers as a whole, shooting just 64% of the free throw line, 28.5% from three. That should be going northward, and after a rough night number 1 for Cliff Amarui, he's really been able to pick it up. He's been able to give the team a combined 26 rebounds in the last 3 games, had 4 blocks in that win over Georgetown as well. That's what he needed to get going after a little bit of a slow start to the season. And with Noah Fernandez, if you can get him going, that's going to be big as well. The UMass transfer, he was missing for much of the season last year, but last few years at UMass when he was out there on the floor was doling out north of 4.5 assists, a steal and a half per contest, high 30s three-point shooter. He's got a lot of upside for his Rutgers backcourt. Meanwhile, with Howard, do like what Bryce Harris is able to bring to the table. He's been able to log about 18.5 points, 6 boards per contest, but you don't necessarily have a ton of size out there. It is very good to see Seth Towns, the Van Wilder of college basketball, back out there for the first time since the 2020-21 season. He had 13 points, 6 boards in his season debut. That was a game which the team was able to win over Boston U, but have to wonder how much you're going to be able to get out of him because he's a former Ivy League Player of the Year. That was during the 2017-18 season, though. It has been a while since then, and I think that we have went through like 2 presidential changes ever since then. I mean, good grief, it's just been so long since he's really been at full force. You do have Jordan Harrison as well, who he's a good 3-point shooter that I still remember during the 2019-20 season at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He shot 44% from 3-point range, so you've got guys for Howard, they're able to put the ball in the basket. They did a good job holding down Boston U on defense, but Boston U is legitimately one of the worst teams in all of college basketball this season. I think that Rutgers takes it to a Howard team that is in a little bit of transition with trying to welcome back in their Seth Towns. So I did set Rutgers as a 15-point favorite. Going to be willing to lay the number, and at 143 or less, taking a look at the over. 306-539, 306-540. UC San Diego is going to be playing us a Navy. Navy is an underdog of 7.5 points. Your total is between 136.5 and 137.5. With Navy, I did set them as an underdog of just 3 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points with UC San Diego. It's a little bit of an all-over-the-place team ever since they have joined the Division I ranks. And for UC San Diego, I think the biggest key for them is just having Bryce Pope be better than anyone else that is out there on the floor for Navy. Bryce Pope last season was able to log about 18.5 points per contest. Didn't shoot it great from three, but as far as the season, shooting 47% from the outside, 19 points per contest. This entire backcourt is wired around him. Now you've got Francis Nwoke, who's a very good, versatile player for this team. At 6'7" last season, shot about 38.5% for three, 13 points, 7 boards. You've got Emmanuel Shaminga as well, who's been dealing with a little bit of an injury, so this team has had him out of the fold. But Jerron Brooks, after he was injured throughout the entirety of last season, began his career at Washington and USC. He's been able to provide about 5 boards, 8.5 points, a little bit of versatility as he's able to pop some threes as well, though, for UC San Diego. Right now they're shooting 40% from three. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there. And the big key for Navy, making games yucky, slow, and gross. This Navy team is based around defense. They are going to be trying to generate some turnovers. They don't necessarily have ideal size for rebounding, though. Donovan Draper, no relation to another Draper, is able to give you about 7.5 rebounds per game, so he's going mad with rebounds. You've also been able to get some good production out of Mac McDonald, who's been able to give you about 7 points per contest, was a reserve for the team a season ago that did shoot 52.5% from three on 38 threes, so he's able to light it up from three, and Navy did have quite a few good three-point shooters this season ago. Currently, they're shooting 27% from three. That should be going northward. They did lose quite a few pieces from the season ago, so they are in transition. They're going to be looking at Austin Inge along with Austin Benjini to be able to step up in the backcourt. These are a pair of guys averaging about 17.5 points per contest, but I think the togetherness of Navy, I think the fact that Navy does such a good job of staying focused on the task, making things yucky, gross, defense-oriented, is going to be able to hold them in this game. Set Navy as a 3-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Made my total a 133 as well, so going to be diving in on the under to go along with those points. 306-541, 306-542. Holy Cross is playing us to Elon. Actually, this is a neutral court game out there at Winthrop Coliseum. Holy Cross, a 1-point favorite. Totals between 145 and 145.5. Set my total at a 144.5. I'm going to be willing to go in on the under. You saw Holy Cross give up 89 points to Winthrop yesterday. I think that the defense is going to be a little bit better. And Elon, they shot 14 of 28 from three yesterday against IUPUI. That speaks much more to the IUPUI defense rather than the Elon offense, who is currently shooting north of 40% from three-point range. That should calm down a little bit. Now, with Elon, I did set them as an underdog of 4.5 points, even though I do like the addition of Rob Higgins, who's been able to give the team about 7.5 points per contest. Last 4 years at St. Francis of New York, was able to log between 11 and 11.5 points per game, was incredibly consistent, and the big key for this Holy Cross team is being able to shut down Max McKinnon. McKinnon has been the primary guy for Elon this season with about 14 points, just under 5 boards, 3 assists. He's been a do-it-all player and is really their top rebounder, which is big because Holy Cross, they've lost Jarrell Gates from season ago, which had them in flux in terms of the forward spot, but you've got a nice trio in the backcourt. Will Batchelor along with Joe Octave, Bo Montgomery. Batchelor, he's been able to give you about 8.5 points per contest, shooting in the low to high 30s from three-point range the last few seasons. Bo Montgomery is able to give you a few rebounds last year, 4 boards, 2.5 assists. He's been logging in the neighborhood about 11 points this season, and Joe Octave has really been the main scorer. He had just 2 points in the game yesterday against Winthrop. That was a little bit less than terrific, but a career mid-30s three-point shooter that I think should be able to pick it up quite a bit. And for Luth M. Koulibaly, I think that he's the key for Holy Cross down low. Thus far this season, about 4 rebounds per game, but at 6'9" size, pretty much missed all of last season due to injury. Season before was a good designated rebounder for this Holy Cross team, and with Elon not necessarily having a ton down low, and Holy Cross having just a good backcourt in general, I do think that they are going to be able to take hold of this game, so I did set Holy Cross as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them on this 1 point line, set my total at a 144.5. I do think that Elon is going to have some regression come through with regards to their shooting, so diving in on the under and diving in on Holy Cross laying the 1. 306-540 543, 306, 544. Santa Clara is playing us to Southeast Louisiana. Southeast Louisiana is a underdog of 16 points. Your total between 155 and 156. And with Southeast Louisiana, Southern Miss 13-point underdogs. I'm going to be willing to take these points with Santa Clara. Very impressive win against Stanford. I do say that knowing that Stanford is not very well coached, to say the least. I mean, good grief. The way that Jared Haas has run that program into the ground is very, very sad. But that said, take the win where you can get it. But with the Southeast Louisiana team, I think that they're legitimate contenders out there in the Southland. I really like what Roger McFarland is able to bring to the table. 6'5", do-it-all player, 17 points, 7 boards. Last year shot 40% from three-point range. He's going to be a hard guard for Santa Clara. Now, Santa Clara might have the best peer scorer out there on the floor. That would be Carlos Marshall Jr. Marshall Jr. limited due to injury a season ago, coming over from Tennessee State. 2 seasons ago at Tennessee State was a 40% three-point shooter. He's picking up right where he left off, already logging about 22 points per contest, and it will be difficult for Southeast Louisiana to match up with the size that you've got of Santa Clara. Francisco Cafaro is right around 7'1", comes in from Virginia. Johnny O'Neal at 6'10" is able to pop some threes. You've been able to have Christoph Tilley be able to do a solid job in the post as well, but when it comes to Southeast Louisiana, I do think that they're going to be able to get just enough out of someone like Brody Woodbury to be able to hold up down low. Was able to last season give the team about 6 boards per contest. He's got a nice body at 6'11" as well, so that's going to be helpful. Alec Woodard is able to shoot some threes. Nick Caldwell, throughout his career as a 6'7" combo player, has been relatively solid from the outside. Last year, shot 37.5% from 3, 11 points, 5.5 boards. Southeast Louisiana has a lot of guys with good versatility. They do turn the ball over a little bit too much, but I think that there should be some positivity with their overall 26% three-point shooting, as the last 2 games came on the road against Auburn and BYU. So I think that things are going to be a little bit more rosy there. And for Santa Clara, this team has been doing a very solid job with their defense. They held St. Francis of PA to less than 60 points. They held Utah Tech below 70 as well. So I do think that this total has creeped up a little bit too far. Semi-total of 153. Southeast Louisiana is a fast team, but they're not a breakneck pace team. So diving in on the under, and with getting 16 points, going to be taking it with Southeast Louisiana. 306, 545, 306, 546. It is North Alabama, and they're playing us to Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State is an underdog of 2 points, and your total is between 143.5 and 144.5. I set this line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with North Alabama. North Alabama does lose a few pieces from last season, like Daniel Ortiz, who was able to shoot 40+% from three-point range, but they get to go up against a Jacksonville State team that they're just a little bit out of sorts right now. Jacksonville State has a nice player in Kai Tandy who comes in from Xavier. He was really an afterthought for Xavier the last few seasons, but he's come in, has given the team 16.5 points per contest, but he really doesn't do anything other than shoot. He doesn't give you really a lot of facilitation. That's more Quincy Clark, who he comes in after he spent his first 2 seasons over at Lipscomb, and at Lipscomb last year was a relatively solid off-the-bench scorer with about 6 points per contest, but with this North Alabama team, even with Ortiz out of the fold, you still have a guy in Damian Forrest who's able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. You've also been able to get some nice production of Tim Smith Jr. Comes in from the non-Division I level, has been shooting 40% from 3 with 7 boards per contest at 6'7", and KJ Johnson has always been able to do a nice job of being able to dish out the ball. His assists are a little bit down this year, but he is supplying about 14 points per game, and then you're able to couple that with Will Sosi, who shot well above 40% from three-point range a season ago. North Alabama, a little bit too loose with the ball right now, 14.5 turnovers per game. They're shooting about 38% from 3, and Jacksonville State was a team that was very much like that last year as well. And this year, they're shooting about 35% from 3, 82% the free throw line, but they're turning the ball over 14 times per contest as well. But I do think that in a battle of teams that really don't have a lot of size, I think that Forrest is going to be able to win that battle down low, and that'll allow this North Alabama team to get the job done at home. I set North Alabama as a 3.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. Even though both of these teams do shoot it well from 3, neither play up-tempo, and both are very sloppy with their possession. So semi-total of 143.5, you're at a 144, diving in on the under to go along with North Alabama. 306, 547, 306, 548. Creighton is going to be playing us at Texas Southern. Texas Southern between 26 and 27-point underdogs. Totals between 142.5 and 143. I just set Creighton as a 29-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Creighton. Creighton looked so good in that game against Iowa, and for Creighton, they finally have depth. That was the biggest issue that I had with this team a season ago. A season ago, they were pretty much 5.5 deep. That was a big concern, in my opinion. Now, Not only do you have those guys in the backcourt, like you've got Trey Alexander putting in their 21 points per contest. Not only do you have Ryan Kalkbrenner doing a nice job down low. He's only averaging about 3.5 rebounds per game. That is certainly going to be going northward, but a 7-footer that's able to give you blocks, that's able to pop threes. But now you've got Frederick King, who's able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. He's very good in the post. Fran Farabello is able to dole out the ball. He's able to pop some threes. You've gotten some good production thus far out of Steve Ashworth, shooting 46% from distance. You bring in someone from Memphis and Jonathan Lawson, who's a little bit of a glue guy. This team is able to go 8+ deep, and that's a big X factor for Creighton going up against a Texas Southern team that I like the addition of Kenny Hunter. Kenny Hunter, he's been not scoring a lot for the team with only about 3.5 points per contest, but pulling in their 6 boards. You just need to find someone that's able to shoot other than PJ Henry along Jonathan Cisse. Cisse's season ago over at Incarnate Word was logging about 14 to 15 points per contest, shot it well from 3, only about 8.5 points per game out of him. And for PJ Henry, I just go back to what we saw in that game against Arizona State. He torpedoed their chances of winning because he went 5 of 24 from the floor. You can't take 24 field goals and only come away with 12 points. Now, I recognize that the scoring around him is just not necessarily there. You do have Shaquille O'Neal's son, and Shaquille O'Neal, he's not quite what his father was, but I mean, someone like a Deion Stroud, I think, is actually a relative upside guy. Began his career at UTEP at Fresno State. He had a year during the 2020-21 season where he had 12 points per game and shot 35% from 3. He's fallen off the face of planet Earth the last 2 years, but I mean, this is a guy that's capable of being able to pop some shots. Texas Southern, not the world's worst team on the glass, but until they get some defiant scoring, I think that's going to be rough for them. And Creighton, they're looking like one of the best offenses in all of college basketball. I think that they absolutely roll through this Texas Southern team, and I do think that Texas Southern sees a little bit of a tick up with regards to their scoring as well. So this is a spot where I did set my line at 29. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Creighton, and did set my total at 149. When you get out of hand games, typically the scoring, it comes and the points are affluent, so I do expect that to be the case here. Going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm willing to lay it with Creighton, 3-6-5-49, 3-6-5-50. Arkansas Pine Bluff plays host Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word is an underdog of between 4.5 and 6 points, and your total on this game is anywhere between 159 and 160.5. It's at my total at 149. I'm going to be going in on the under. Recognize that both of these teams play a little bit faster, but Incarnate Word has never really been a super duper up-tempo team, and both of these teams, while they do play at a little bit of a faster clip, it's not like they're really efficient on the offensive side of things as well. You need to hit shots in order to be able to get these totals over, not just run up and down the floor. So I'm going to be taking a look at the under, but with Pine Bluff, I did set them as a 7-point favorite because Kyler Milton, I think, is the best player out on the floor. He's right now shooting 58% from 3, 25.5 points, 5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest. This is a little bit artificially inflated because they played against 2 non-D1 schools and a Central Arkansas team that's one of the fastest teams in all of college basketball. You've also got Mr. Green light all the time and Rashad Williams. The reason why I call him that is that if you take a look at what he did when he was over at Oakland during the 2019-20 season, he attempted 12.6 threes per game. That is the most threes attempted per game of any player in the last 15 years. So that was interesting. He was able to log 19.5 points per game. Very much a volume shooter, to say the least. And you do have Joe French for Pine Bluff, a guy that over the last 3 seasons has shot 40+% from three-point range. But with Pine Bluff, they're currently shooting 43% from 3, 81% of the free throw line. We should be seeing a little bit of fall off here. They don't necessarily have a ton of rebounding, but not like Incarnate Word is doing a great job on the glass. Now, Skywicks, he comes over after he began his career at Missouri State, went down to the non-Division I level, and he has resurfaced with 23 points per contest in the first 3 contests for this Incarnate Word team, but you have to question what you're going to be able to get around him. I'm feeling good about John Robinson. He last season over at Austin P was able to put in there right around 10 points, 4 boards. He's a career about 30% three-point shooter at 6'9", so he should be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass. But I mean, really, other than he and Wicks, you don't have any sort of rebounding whatsoever. You're looking at TJ Ford Jr. coming in off the bench, trying to give this team some minutes as a little bit of facilitator. That's been sloppy as Incarnate Word has turned the ball over 16 times per contest. And with this Incarnate Word team, I don't think that they're going to be playing very up-tempo moving forward as well. Once again, they're a little bit artificially inflated because they played against Shriner College, and they were able to put up 100 4 points in that one. So I did set my line at 7. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Arkansas Pine Bluff and make my total a more respectable 149. So diving in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Pine Bluff. And we wrap things up with 306-551, 306-552. BYU plays us at Morgan State. Morgan State is an underdog of between 30 and 30.5 points. Your total is anywhere between 156.5 and 157. Set my line at 28.5. I think we've gone a little bit too far here. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Morgan State. This Morgan State team is gross. There's no question about it. This is a at minimum bottom 10 team in college basketball. Might be when it's all said and done, bottom 5 team in all of college basketball, but I do think that we've went a skosh too far because with this BYU team, they are going to be able to light it up from 3-point range, but we've seen them have their turnover woes over the last few years as well. They do have Trevin Nell, who's been able to do a nice job putting it in there with darn near 15 points per contest, shooting 47.5% from 3, and as a whole, BYU shooting about 37.5% from 3. Their turnover woes have yet to take hold. They're only turning the ball over about 9.5 times per contest. They had that tough game against San Diego State, but they also played against Houston Christian and Southeast Louisiana, 2 of the worst defensive teams in all of college basketball. That artificially inflates it a little bit. Fusani Trayer, he's going to be able to take Christian Oliver to task down low. Oliver for this Morgan State team is a true 7-footer coming up from the non-Division I level. Who's actually been halfway decent on the glass. He's been able to give you double figures in 3 out of the 4 games as well, but for Morgan State, they are a team that is turning the ball over 17 times per contest. Not great. I do think that there's a little bit of upside with Miles Thompson, though. Missed all of last season due to injury, but last we saw him during the 2021-22 campaign over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania. 11 points per contest, shot 41% from 3 at 6'7". That's a little bit of a matchup nightmare, and if you could just get something out of Winston Tabbs. You may recall when he was over at Boston College, he spent 2 injury-plagued seasons there, but in the ACC, he was averaging like 13.5 points per contest, mid-33-point shooter. He was really a nice player, but he's had a lot of his career robbed by injury as well. You're looking at a little bit of something here, but when it comes to this BYU team, I do think that they're going to be a little bit too much, especially with Noah Waterman, someone who's 6'11", is able to pound the boards. He's able to shoot it from 3. You've also got an interesting name, and Atiki Ali Atiki, who does a good job down low as well. But I think that BYU is going to be a little bit more of a defense-oriented team as well. Though I do think with Morgan State, this team being in the top 20 in terms of total possessions per game, pretty much each of the last 3 seasons, is going to be cranking up the tempo in this game. We have seen this Morgan State team against Division I competition give up 87 and 122 points, and we have seen this BYU team against all their competition against San Diego State be able to get past 100. So I did set my total 158.5. I think we went just a little bit too far here. I'm going to be willing to take 30 plus with Morgan State, and I'm going to be taking a look at the over as well, and that wraps things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Matt Josephs, better known as Mid-Major Matt, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer this in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, to me does not matter. As per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you are able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.